Hey, everybody. This is Erica, aka the Cosmic Mama, here with Terry Smith, and we have Cory Edmund here, um, freedom fighter, abolitionist, voluntarist, the young man that I met almost maybe a month ago. It's so funny because it's such a little crumb trail because Terry and I were at Journey to the Truth, and we got to meet. Oh gosh.
Zostar.
Zostar. And Zostar said, "Hey, we're having a conference in 2 weeks." I was like, "What? 2 weeks?" And it was near home. I think it's Deltona, isn't it, Deland? And just by chance, towards the time when you're about to leave, you hand me a flyer. I end up meeting your mom, and she's just talking about how great you are and your dad. And they're like a really hot couple. They're really cool. It really was cute because they're like this little hot couple, and she's got on her little skirt, and she's like, "I love my son, and he's the best, and
Oh,
he's amazing."
goodness.
And I'm like, "Oh wow, this is so great!" And the main attraction to that whole conference for me, I went down there to see Sherry Divband as well, but they were talking about food forests and sovereignty and things like that, things that I was looking into in 2017, but quite frankly just lost track of. And I just thought, wow, it's so amazing to meet you, um, who are a part of this big network here in Florida. It's amazing because I mean I hadn't really bumped into these people, and so over time it's just been unfolding, meeting the people that are in your actual area, in your actual network.
Right.
So then finally we meet you. And I'd like for you to go ahead and just tell us more about who you are, and actually, what is this being an abolitionist? What is it to be a part of a food forest? What is your movement? What are you doing?
What am I doing? That's a good question because I question that all the time. I'm approaching subjects and ideas that most of the world are unfamiliar with. And so I constantly reflect on this and I'm like, wow, we're doing the work that so many people are unaware of, but can change their life. And I know it can change their life because I'm meeting people who share their experiences, and they say, "Wow, this changes my life." Whether it's medicine or whether it's philosophy that changes their mind, which gets them to the medicine, right? Every form of knowledge, every form of freedom, I consider a form of medicine, something that's freeing people, helping them out to see their potential and the possibilities within their life. So they say, I do have a choice, not that I don't have a choice in their own life. They are empowering themselves and seeing their own value, their own self ownership. And that's realized over time through this process of meeting other people and finding new information. And so that's what happened to me. And it's just a ripple effect that's happening to everyone that I'm meeting. And it's becoming a magical type of attraction where we're just meeting more and more people who are like minded. We're doing more events. We're creating food forests. We're trying to get land. And so much is happening. And this is similar to what the abolitionists had to deal with in the 1800s because they were trying to end slavery. So they had to convince a world's amount of people that slavery is wrong. They had to build momentum and energy and spirit around their cause. They got together with the churches. The churches were supporting slavery. So they're like, we're going to make our own church. The government supports slavery. We're going to make our own towns, the Underground Railroad. And they just did it themselves. And they inspired enough people to do it themselves because people wanted to. And people saw it was better. And people saw that once people were free, they were actually more productive, not less productive, and that the world would actually be better off, not worse off. But see, people had superstitions for so many thousands of years that were holding them back, their progress, their evolution. So that had to be done away with by people who were willing and courageous and having faith and courage to face those people who were like, no, that's not possible. That can't be done. Let's not look into that. And so I'm an abolitionist now because I'm studying their works, the abolitionists, and I'm trying to free people from other forms of slavery, not just chattel slavery. So that includes political slavery in particular, and economic slavery, medical slavery, technological slavery as we move into the age of AI. These are things that we need to understand because many writers, many authors, many philosophers have talked about it. And they've talked about mental slavery versus physical slavery, which I deduce is basically the primacy of all the forms of slavery. So if you understand mental slavery and you understand the psychological components, the philosophy components, it really all comes together. And so that's what I do. You know, my book, Slavery Gone for Good, I published this, and it goes into over 100, like 440 pages, hundreds of different, abolitionists, former slaves, psychologists. I mean, everything you could think of that I certainly was not taught in school. And more I'm finding out, wow, this is just unbelievable. The things that people can do and the systems that we can set up to truly free ourselves. And it has nothing to do with politics or what people typically think about freedom in the modern world.
So I'm going to ask you a question based on all that. Are you inspired? Do you feel that you're inspired by, I'm going to use the word divine essence, but I don't want to get religious. But do you find that your inspiration is coming from a space beyond your intellect? It's coming, you're bringing it down from the higher source?
Yes, absolutely. And to put that into words would be rather difficult, as one might assume you're taking the outworldly into the worldly. So even Carl Jung talks about that problem, and then even applying science to religion could be problematic since their own fields, and science is always looking at the worldly, whereas religion by its nature is looking at the outworldly. So it can get very complicated, and that's when I need to really like slow down my words and be present, because presence is the key to connecting to that spirit. It's also the key to being aware and seeing what's on in your environment so you can make these observations. I don't think you need to be a spiritual person per se to come to understand the points I'm making. But nonetheless, when I talk about inspiration, I am invoking a sense of spirit. I am invoking something higher than me. That is the truth. That is morality. That is the golden rule. That is all of us in the same earth. That is the Tao. That's that unseen forces, the natural laws that we're all bound to, karma, cause and effect. There's a bunch of ways to interpret the things that we're all bound to, the things that we are having to abide to beyond man-made law. And so, yes, absolutely. That is a great indeed inspiration. My whole channel is called Cory Nature's the Answer. So I think that sort of provides perspective as to what is my inspiration. It's nature. And why is that? It's because we're losing connection to perhaps who we are and knowing thyself, which also means knowing thy enemy and knowing the world around us. When we know ourselves, it's key. And again, how do we know ourselves unless we're present and we're aware and we're open and we're looking through our lives and our traumas and facing reality without trying to distract ourselves from it or hide away from it, right? So that to me signifies that many people might be distracting themselves from source, from spirit, from God. And that's why we're unable to see it.
So you have quite a compilation on your site. Is this the proper site that you would say, hey, come check me out?
Yes, that is basically a bunch of links. It's not my site.
Okay.
But it's a bunch of links for all of my links, basically. So you'll have several of my websites on there, a bunch of video channels, everything on there. And I encourage people to look through it because I have many hundreds of videos of all different kinds talking about pretty much every single subject. I'm sure there's subjects I have not touched on that much, but there's always a lot of great works on the way. And I'm working on documentaries. I'm working on more books. I'm working on so many different ways to portray the truth. I've written up comedy skits and theater scripts, all sorts of things. And it's just a matter of time for things to unfold, even psychological experiments I'm ready to do in person. And so when we get land in this area, around Tampa, Florida. And when I connect with my generation, there's a lot of potential for things that can happen because we all have it. The resources are there. The truth is there. There's nothing new under the sun. Nature provides us all the medicine in the world. All we have to do is learn how to grasp it, frankly, and utilize it.
Those are several of your books. The most recent one, what's the name of the most recent book? Is it out now?
Yes, Slavery Gone for Good, the Black Book edition. So that one all the way to the left there. Yeah.
Okay. Slavery Gone for Good. And basically you're discussing this. It's opening the mind and giving people the knowledge that they need to change their story, to write their own story.
And I'm open to learn from you, right? Because I'm curious how, what you think about this. And obviously my message might be kind of strange to some people. So I want to be, I'm open to anything you guys have to ask me whatsoever. And anybody in the chat as well. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. And we can practice some ageism. You're a young person. You're so motivated. And I think that's a huge part of the inspiration of the group that I was in. People were just really excited about you and your fire, the fire and passion that you have at this age. I mean, how old are you, Cory? If you don't mind saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine. It's 23, right? People use age as a attack sometimes and other times as a compliment. In either case, I think it's irrelevant, but I guess it signifies, it is a sense of energy and moving into the next generation and change making, because I do think that this generation is going to be the ones to change the future. I mean, we're going to be the ones to have kids and pass on the knowledge. So there is a level of significance to it that I can't deny, which is why I'm trying to connect with my generation in the coming months and thinking about, strategies on how to appeal to them, which, I get along with them. I think they're intelligent people. They may be misguided. They may not learn or know about any of the solutions I talk about, but that's why they're not involved. And especially because they're not inspired. That word you use is so important, and connecting to that question about spirit and God, it ties in perfectly. Our culture is dying, the games are dying, the music is dying, and people feel it, they see it, which is why they're listening to the 80s and the 70s nonstop, because that music inspired people. It got people going. People were hanging out. People were going to their neighbors. People were going to the gym. People were watching movies together. People were buying games. You don't do that anymore. People just all sit down on Netflix in their own houses, isolated from the rest of the world, and they do their own thing. We're lacking our connectivity, and we're especially lacking nature. And so that's only going to grow more apparent, and my message is only going to become more relevant as time moves on. So it can go way past my time, and it's going to make my age very much irrelevant.
So it will eventually, but at this point, I guess for people who have, like my son is 17, and maybe we're not seeing the inspiration for our kids.
Good point.
That we can see you as a person who, as they say, iron sharpens iron. To have the appeal that you have, because maybe you say things differently, you present differently. Like when I look at all your links, like you're into the games, you're into the cartoon forms, like you're into the different types of media that might appeal, that as older people might be talking to our kids, and they're like, okay, mom, leave me alone, where it's like, okay, you might have the tool or instrument or the path that can connect, that can turn that switch where our kids at this point are parent deaf, then that inspiration, that energy that you have can inspire them. So definitely we are looking at your age, you know what I mean? And not as a way to try to down you or pigeonhole you because you're so young, you can't know all these things. But it's like, this thing that can say, wow, maybe you can light a fire in this, in among our different youth. And you're right, they are somewhat misguided. And I think it's going to be like a all or nothing, because I think people who would come around you, they're either going to be lit and inspired, or they're going to reject it completely and be like, hey, get away from me. You're just like way too extreme, or you're
Right.
thinking you're just way too serious and I just want to have fun.
Approach matters, right?
Or yeah, but so for sure, I'm looking at you as, hey, let me go to an event that you're at and bring my own son and see if he's lit, by your experience, because too,
Yeah.
I was a very technical person too. So there's these logical conversations and you're a logical person as well. So, I mean, and that's why I put that forward. And I know, Terry, I know you had a thought that you wanted to say, and I kind of slipped in between you.
No, I was just going to ask you, Cory, when did you, at what age or at what point? I know you were probably born to it, but when did you sort of have the awakening, or you've always had that awakening in it? And obviously your parents are very much encouraging you. So,
Or did you encourage your parents?
Or-
Maybe your parents weren't worried about it, and you were like, "Hey, mom, I don't know."
When did you really start to get into creating a movement, or get versed and putting yourself out there? And like I said, I'm sure that it was, you probably started a lot, a few years ago, but where you are now, what would you say was that sort of that point that it was like, this is
exactly what I need to do, and I'm gonna put my hands to the plow, and I'm not turning back.
Yeah, my friend Daryl says simplicity is not extremism. Nature is the answer. It doesn't get any simpler. It's true. My message is rather simple. You guys hit on so many things. I'm just like, it's definitely firing up my passion right now. So, you're touching on things that obviously you're touching on my childhood. You're touching on different things that are very focal points. And there is a buildup to a lot of this, and I want to tie into your personal experience with your son as well. So I'll kind of get to that. So when I was 13, I was researching ingredients in the grocery store. And that kind of opened me up to see a lot of the problems. But beforehand, and generally just within my life, I was very much I didn't have friends. I was bullied because of my weight, so I was overweight. I was very conformist. I followed everything I was told. So when the schools told me that bacteria was bad, I became a germophobic. And anytime somebody sneezed or coughed, I would be like, "Oh my gosh!" Right? Make a big deal and be super dramatic, which I'm sure is also incited through television and media, which makes things dramatic. A lot of that can come from different sources. When you're a child, you're very vulnerable. You're taking in a lot from different places, right? So there's a lot to layer in, to keep in mind. How does somebody become who they are? But I had imaginary friends, and I would talk to myself, simulative, basically, and run through scenarios in my head, and that got me thinking. But what did it, especially for me, was journaling, writing down my thoughts, reflecting on the world, and reflecting on myself. And I did this consistently. And I would write down anything. And I would have, the only rule in my journal would be not to delete anything. And so I held this for, I'd say, pretty long. And it started out with the central theme being love, in particular, because it's like a driving force. And of course, my parents were always very supportive. So even when I was overweight, I would ask them, say, "Am I overweight?" Because all the kids, at school are judging me. My parents would not encourage what the kids were telling me to get into my own head, because that's it's what kids do. I mean, that's what people do. They try to get inside your own head. So my parents kept me on a good self-esteem, which is very important. They may have not known about how I was being poisoned, how I was eating all this junk food all the time, the standard American diet. I refused to eat anything healthy, salads, coconuts, nothing like that, which I would obviously eat all that now. I'm very disciplined as a health coach. I got into nutrition. Health was like the first in for me. And I just got there naturally because I was like, wow, nobody's reading ingredient list. So when I was reading ingredient list, I felt kind of special as a kid. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm reading something that other people aren't. And I'm seeing stuff in our food that nobody else sees. And I thought it was kind of fun to, be like, oh, look at this new product. This is this new product. So I made it fun and exciting. And I was inspired to learn more and more. So then I started working out. I started, expanding my mind through the journaling. And all of it kind of just came together. I was losing the weight. My mind was shifting. So here comes, 2016, I get into politics, into freedom and those ideas. But my message being nature is the answer I held long before that. And I wasn't applying it to politics. I was applying it to nutrition, because I understood natural medicine is amazing. And I understood that from a nutritional point of view and other points of view because I was studying all these different foods and their components and how we're not taught about that. So, and how it's not patentable and how doctors aren't taught about nutrition. So it's like everything was just unveiling. Freedom was inevitable to run into because I would talk to doctors and they'd be like, I can't give them my patient this thing because it's banned or because insurance or some other, there's always issues with doctors and being able to practice what they want to practice personally. And so I ran into these moral conflictions where I was like, wow, I'm a good person. I want to do good into the world. My parents taught me general basic morality, but they don't know anything about politics. We were never a political family and none of us cared at all. We just have fun all the time. And that's how I like it now still, life to me is not about politics. It's actually helping people get past politics at the moment. And what my current work is helping people see it's all not necessary for the evolution of humanity. We need to have more fun. We need to enjoy each other's presence. So my parents set those foundations in, whether they realized it or not, just by having fun, just by being supportive, just by being parents and not being restrictive with me. They didn't have to hit me or whatever, ground me. And I never really had those experiences because I was always obedient to everybody. And because I was so trying to be moral, but I was mixing my morality with obedience, I ran into a contradiction around 16 or 18 where I was like, wait, obedience is not virtue. And I found this out and I'm like, wait, something is going on here. There's these teachers in school, you got the politicians, you got the doctors, and they're telling people how to live their own lives in different ways. And some of them are supportive and some of them want to help the individual. And even if their intentions are good, their actions may not line up with their intentions or what they say, right? So I was just kind of going through all of that. And so in 18, I became an integrative nutrition health coach, had my own practice. And when COVID hit in 2019, I totally shifted my focus to freedom because I realized we can't just heal the individual, we have to heal the world, and that requires looking at the mind. So now a lot of my works are more psychological, and I talk to people about all sorts of deeper consciousness aspects, things that would just blow your mind away. But then as I move forward, it's like I got into permaculture. Right now I'm in Florida all of a sudden. And now I'm meeting people like Jim Gale and getting involved with growing food. So, I don't have a super long journey, but it is an interesting shift to go from a young age to, I'm still, I guess, relatively young, I guess, to do things. But I think everybody, no matter where they are, can do things, right? And I don't claim to have the knowledge of how the world works. Like I'm always trying to figure out things. So I don't say this is my journey. Like I'm still on that journey. You know what I mean? I'm still experiencing that. And there's still a lot of learning to take place. There always is. And if I were to restrict that, then I'd be inhibiting what brought me to where I am now. So, we want to say we're free. We want to say we know everything and everybody else is in the dark. They're sheeple, they're zombies. But if we do that, now we're separating ourselves from our fellow man. We're not seeing them as brothers and sisters. And we can cause actually more division than unity, which, is our goal not unity? Is our goal not to change the world and to connect with them and help their minds? So I came to understand I followed independent media since I was 16, and I was like, oh my goodness, none of them are talking about action and how to actually change the world. So now I'm doing it myself. I'm literally having to do it myself. All these people are reporting the news, and they'll report the news. Even when the whole world goes and collapses, they'll have stuff to report on day by day, but they're never going to mobilize people. They're never going to bring people together to say, this is what needs to be done. And so somebody's got to do it. Jim Gale's doing it. I'm doing it. There's certain communities that are doing it, but right now they're not mainstream, even in the independent. But even if the independent media grabs a hold of this knowledge and understands the topics we talk about, we can change the world overnight, like within a week, just with a couple of millions of people that follow independent media. All it takes is like 1%, 3% of the population and to create a revolution, to change the world. Now, of course, it's going to take more percentage to actually change things in the aggregate, but that can happen so naturally because people are like, these ideas are irresistible when people start finding out how powerful they are. So like permaculture, the fact you can grow food with abundance, with ease, it's easier than a lawn to grow a food forest. It's cheaper and it's better for the
Wow.
environment. And we would end hunger, deforestation, cancer, diabetes, all the problems we think of. Most of it goes out the door with simply growing food, native perennials in our area, replacing the lawns. There's more acreage of artificial lawns than there are corn, wheat, all our crops combined and food forests combined. Like, there's more lawns than everything. And it also is the worst monocrop. It doesn't even produce anything. It doesn't produce any food. We have it purely for looks. So we might talk about all sorts of conspiracies, but that's like the biggest one. And it's right in front of our faces. So you'll find this often. It's like the truth is right in front of our faces. And that's why my message is so simple. Nature is the answer, And so when it comes to your son, what inspires him? How does it feel to be inspired? I would ask questions. I would get him curious. I would start thinking, what are his interests? And I don't, as much as I like my events and the content I produce right now, it is not, I would say, suitable for my generation or younger. I say some people in my generation would be interested. They would like my energy. They might like what I hear, but I realize, I share a lot of their sympathies. Yeah, I don't want to talk about the problems of the world. I want to just have fun. I just want to enjoy my life. I'm just like them, right? They don't want to look at these problems because it takes them away from that. I get that. So there needs to be a level of inspiration or change that happens in their life or something affects them, whether it's their health or the problems in the world that gets to them. Maybe they're going to college and they find out all the expenses. There's always going to be some sort of point in which something unlocks. I mean, I interview people. It's COVID. It's 2008. It's 2001. 9/11. All sorts of things that can shift people. But inspiration is big, and I do plan on inspiring my generation. I just don't think my content or my events right now are suited to that. But that's what I'm going to shift to in the coming months, and showing with Food Forest. I mean, tell me a child, tell me anyone, any age, who doesn't like interacting with nature or animals. Okay. That right there is a huge door opening for so many individuals to learn about all sorts of things. When they find out that they can grow food with ease and they don't even need to go to the grocery store, that they can solve all sorts of diseases and that they can feel better and eat foods that they enjoy that are like, cotton candy, mango, chocolate pudding fruit, the chocolate sapote, like, that's just amazing. Who would that not inspire? It's just, that's what I'm talking about. And so I think your son, you got to give it time. 17.
Oh yeah.
So much things can happen in somebody's mind, but just by asking questions, just by being supportive, like my parents were to me, that did wonders, even though they did not intend whatsoever on anything. And I had to convince them of these ideas, by the way. They were totally resistant to a lot of the ideas I talk about. And a lot of the concepts that that we perhaps talk about in the truth movement. Like, they had no clue. They didn't follow anybody in independent media. I was researching all that myself. Naturally, just by being with them, just by spending time with them, they started to understand me, and they were open to what I had to share because I was putting it in practice too. It's like, hey, Mom, you should buy this product instead of that product. Oh, okay, I'll try that because it's made better. So why wouldn't I not take it? It's like, and I'm encouraging it because I say, oh, well, it's made better. It's got this and that. And I'm sharing the reasoning why. And, so over time, now our whole diet changes. Now we're not getting sick. That's strange. Now our mind is opening because we're getting more nutrients. It's kind of like a natural progression, not a forced, like, you need to wake up, you need to understand what's happening in the world, but like a natural progression, right? That's what we want.
I 100% agree with you. I was having a conversation at the last conference, and the question Sean asked me was, if you were going to change the world and help the world ascend, what would you change first? And my answer was the food. Because naturally, by the intake of the food, it would change the way that we think and how we feel about nature and how we treat, if you had to slaughter your own meat, you might slow down on how much meat you eat. If you had to grow your own food, you would think more about how it's made, how it gets to you, and right, connecting with nature more. And I think this automatically, if we got away from the processed food, like automatically there's going to be so many changes in our health, but
Yes.
also in the way that we think just by nature of putting in natural foods. I met this doctor from Africa, and he said that his grandfather, he didn't even break the food off the branch. He called it first life, that he would eat the food directly from the branch. Or like, say if he did have bananas, like he wouldn't pick it unless it was going right in his mouth, he wouldn't even pick it. That it was called like first life when it came to food. And I don't
Wow.
know, so I just thought that was really cool. One thing that stands out to me is when you talked about the bullying. um I was talking to someone, and their son is going through a depression in their 30s. And I don't know if your bullying, did it lead? I know it led to some self-doubt, but did it lead to depression? But I'm asking this because I noticed that my son is more of a thinker, because at first he really didn't have all those friends. And because he didn't have all those friends and all the distraction of
Right.
simulating what other people do, it allows him to be very much more unique and think deeply about other things. Do you feel that, life would have been completely different if you had been Cory, the cool guy who was hanging out with everybody, and how this bullying affected you? And what did you, um, was it the food, and your interest that kept you out of the depression, or how did that all work for you?
That's a really, I like that question. I like the fact you pick up on that. Like that that's a very unique. I like that. It's a good approach. Um, well, I never really had depression, and I helped actually a lot of kids who did have depression in high school.
Right.
Because I had a very strong family life. So I would say that is the
Yeah.
reason why I did not fall to such. Frankly, I just didn't get along, or I wasn't a fan of a lot of the other kids, perhaps just because they were immature. Most men, especially, it's like
Yeah.
they never matured. So I would like sit at the girls' table, and I had short hair, by the way, all my whole life. So if people throw that on me too, but it's interesting because I just grew up just like anybody else. I wasn't really special or anything. And so I like to put that out there. It's like I don't want to make myself sound special or anything, because I'm not. I had a very supportive family, and that leads, I'd say, to generally a good outcome. Because a lot of people, if I make a general observation in the world today, most people just don't have their family nearby. I look at kids my age too, and it's like, where's your mom? Where's your dad? Like, where's your family? It's like, oh, half of them are pregnant and half of them are already married. It's like, whoa, and then the divorce rate's over 50%. Something's not right. So there's issues with depression and anxiety, the mental health epidemic for sure. And I was helping that with in high school, especially a lot of different kids, just by being there, just by being present, just by supporting them. And so that's what my parents did for me. The bullying didn't even affect me one bit, because I just walked past it, frankly. Like if somebody said something about me and my parents kept me in a good self-esteem, I just was like, no, I'm not overweight. I literally told my own psyche I wasn't overweight, even though I was, which at an older age, perhaps is not the best thing, because you don't want to deny reality. But at a young age, it keeps you kind of going, because that can probably affect your psyche quite a bit, I would imagine, to push yourself down like that and say, oh man, I'm not good enough, or I need to be somebody. And it tends to be when people are younger, they fall into those identities and they want to be somebody, which is why they get into those cliques and they get into those social groups, and they want to fit in with certain kids. So when you're the outcast, you actually find more of yourself, and you want to. And being the outsider, you can see things that the insiders, those in those relationships, do not see. And so you're able to observe people's relationships before you get in one. And so now, obviously I'm creating events, I'm doing all this stuff that's very external. But before, when I was growing up, I was very introvert. I was very shy. I didn't talk at all, like ever. And people were always constantly nagging on me. Adults were like, you got to talk, you got to do something. It's like I would go to some dance, and it's like all these kids would try to pull me onto the dance floor. I'd be like, no. But then like a couple years later, now I'm the one on the dance floor, and like all the time. And now I'm the one like having a message, having to share it with the world. It's because I utilize all that time to think and to reflect and to be aware before I stepped into the world, before I started making a presence, before I started making content. Imagine I started making video content if
Oh
I
my
was if I
goodness.
was 16, you know, and there's a lot of people who are on TikTok who are already making video content, and they think they know about the world, and they think, oh, this person's bad, that thing is bad. It's like, have they found themselves yet before they started putting out all this content? I'm glad I didn't start a channel when I was 16 or when I was 18. I'm glad I waited because if
Well,
I
for
found
sure, because
myself,
now you're deeply rooted in who you are. And
yes,
I like to use those analogies from the Bible, like the seeds that are digging into the roots of the good soil
hmm,
that aren't on the rocks, they aren't in the weeds. And so they actually have a chance to be deeply rooted. And this is kind of a thing that goes on too. Even people who are well-meaning and spiritual and activists in some way, when if it's not something that is deeply grounded in your knowledge of why am I doing this, because even trying to be an activist, being an activist, or even being spiritual, when you're basically just trying to fit in rather than being deeply grounded in your own true beliefs and your own identity, you still can be led to the slaughter, because now you're moving this way, you're moving that way, you're taking on other people's thoughts and ideas and their values, not necessarily being rooted in your own identity. So that's actually quite profound and important. And it's amazing too, because just bringing up the idea of waiting till you had the mature mind before you decided to lead. And I think a lot of people they want to lead, but they've never even tried to follow. You know what I mean? So they haven't had a
right,
chance to really be a part of something big. And like you say, observe the relationships, observe social dynamics, how to speak to people, how to
yeah,
connect with people, how to deal with rejection. So see, you've already started off dealing with rejection and then becoming this firm, strong person. Now being like, okay, so when someone says that guy's insane, get out of here with these ideas, you're like, okay, not for you, next. So you're able to move on because you've built such a strong foundation. I was really thinking this because I was talking to another lady and I was literally telling her, I think my son dealing with rejection early was probably the best thing for him. Whereas now her son is an older person, a mature adult dealing with it. And it's really a hurdle for him at a later point in life. But I feel like now if he gains his positivity now and moves forward, he might be like indestructible in some
yeah.
way. You know what I mean? Not easily moved, and he'll understand.
A connection with
Definitely,
nature, you know, and just good support in that sense.
yeah,
Because people, I feel like we might have a tendency in the truth community to be like, you have to think a certain way, you need to know this, you need to know that, but that will actually be counterintuitive, you know. So it's important to let things flow and just be present and show by example,
right.
because that's how kids learn most.
And if Terry's a vegan, let Terry be a vegan. If Joseph is doing tarot, he does tarot. And I think the thing for me, because I'm also a person that dealt with rejection and isolation, I kind of stood back and I'm this person that I don't want to be like anybody else. I just want to be like me. So entering into this realm, I kind of maybe sat back a long time to observe rather than jump in and try to imitate and recreate what anybody else has done. So definitely, I think it, but then I'm also this person because I just feel this identity with you, a person who's an observer. I mean, at times I think people didn't even know I could talk when I was, like 5 and 6. People thought, oh, she doesn't talk. And my son too, he withheld speech for a while. But we've been watching the world in a somewhat of a way. I just remember being around people thinking, that's not right. What she just, like I would just observe things that I just didn't think
Yeah,
was right. I
I
was the
said,
person that comes and jumps in and be like, wait a minute, you're bullying her, and that's not right. Like you, and so I just had these strong feelings, and it seems like that's how you are. Like you just have a strong direction of right, wrong, and what's important.
when you live the solution, you are able to see what's not the solution. When,
Right.
when you're surrounded by the solution and then you're exposed to an environment which is not the solution, it's very easy to decipher and discern for yourself without anybody helping you. So when your child is raised in a natural environment or is interacting with nature constantly or interacting with you and constantly, and then they go into the city and they go into all these social cliques and they find out they're all talking about drama about each other and all this gossip, and there's all these advertisements, all these distractions. They're able to decipher and to discern themselves without you having to tell them, yeah, all these people are brainwashed and all these people are order followers and all these people are, you don't have to tell them. They'll see it because they've lived, you can say, a healthy mindset. A healthy mindset prompts healthy environments, healthy, thinking, healthy actions. Everything comes from that foundational point, which is why, the birth process is very important in health. Even just looking at, like, how many vaccines somebody had at their birth, uh, all that stuff about the microbiome. Was it a vaginal birth or was it a C-section? I mean, that makes a huge difference on somebody's life 40 years later.
Tell me about that then, Cory, because I'm interested. Tell us about the C-section and how it changes things.
You can find a lot of documentation about this, but I don't want people to feel like they're powerless either. Because there are definitely a lot of probiotics and ways to reboot that immune system. And somebody I just talked to yesterday, Pat Miletich, who's a former UFC world champion, basically, like, I saw him on my TV when I was like 16. I was like, dude, I literally saw you on my TV. I met him yesterday. It's wild. And, he's been on Joe Rogan and all this stuff. He's a great guy, but he's now a soil savior. He got out of all the mainstream industry, and he was helping build athletes. So he was trying to find out what would be the best way to create strong men. He was known as one of the strongest men in the world, I think. So, now he's looking at the soil. He's trying to reboot our immune systems. And so he's somebody who is like, there's so much about this. So, if anybody wants to look up, Pat Miletich and the work that he's doing now, it would blow your mind. I mean, his life experiences, the traumas that he went through, all sorts of things. Yeah, it's wild. So I was hanging out with him just yesterday at Galt's Landing, and I told them, I said, I've talked to so many people, I've met so many people, but I've never heard a life experience as powerful as his. Like, his life experiences are just so wild to me. I was just blown away by the knowledge he had and the science that he has conducted on a whole array of different things. And so, there were a lot of things that happened in his life when COVID went down, and he had a divorce with his wife, and people thought he was crazy. And there was so much stuff that happened in his life. But he is such a cool, down-to-earth guy who cares. And now he's actually helping his wife restore her microbiome, and her thinking is becoming, like, her mind is changing so much. I mean, so, like, the mind is affected greatly by our gut. And now there's a lot of studies talking about depression and anxiety and how that correlates to your gut, right? And how even your brain shrinks as your gut increases. I mean, like,
wow.
Like, as in, like, a belly, like pregnant.
Yeah, I know. I understand. Your brain shrinks as your belly increases.
Yeah, well, look at
it makes sense because all the nutrients are being trapped now, so it's not getting to the brain. That's one thing that I realized when I was at work. I was starting to lose my memory. I could not complete certain actions, and I felt the message come to me that my brain is starving. And so I watched that show. Gosh, I'm gonna mess myself up by saying what is it? Where the guy, he takes the pill and it gives him all the power in his brains, and I was looking at Joe Rogan, and he was talking like nootropics or whatever. Yeah. And I was like, is there a drug that can fix my brain? And then it was like, wait a minute, I need amino acids. I need I was realizing, like, I need nutrients for my brain. And it just still coming back to food, that our minds are starving. But just the idea that you said that the gut gets bigger, the brain gets smaller.
Well, there's I think the doctor, his name is Daniel Amen, or something like that. He's a brain doctor. He's known as, like, the brain doctor, and he's done brain scans on many, many people who drink alcohol versus not, do this drug versus not, and he'll see how the brain changes. So it's incredible. I encourage people to look that up. He was one of the teachers I learned from in the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, and he's just one among so many people doing great work. The question is it going to be enough for all these people doing all this great work when right now the FDA is doing milk raids? And there was one farm recently, I think in Minnesota, where they had to throw out literally thousands of pounds of raw butter because the FDA walked up to them and was like, you are not allowed to sell raw butter. And so there's literally a video of them throwing it into the dumpster, and like pounds and pounds of it, like a waste of food. And those FDA agents are fat and they're on their clipboard and they're like, because they're not human. They're robots programmed to follow orders. They're not thinking for themselves. Now, truly, they're not robots. Again, this is where the inspiration comes in. I would say to them, I would ask them questions. I would get them thinking. I'd be like, what are you doing here? What gives you the right on this property to mess with these people's stuff? What would you like it if I went through your stuff and said, you can't do this with your stuff? Get them thinking, challenge them by moral questions. And as a human being, though, and love them and with respect and welcome them with open arms and see if they open up to you, right? Because that's what's going to get people out of a robotic trance. Look into MK Ultra. The CIA ran mind control programs all throughout the 80s and 70s and created mass murderers and cult leaders. That's all mainstream knowledge. Mind control is a very real thing. And
is there a particular reason why they're attacking something like milk and butter? Because I would think it's the fatty acids that you need for your brain, or
it's literally one of the healthiest foods you can consume in the world. Raw milk has every nutrient the body needs. You combine milk with eggs and you have every single nutrient you can ever get in the human diet. Everything is bioavailable. There's lactic acid, there's bacteria, there's enzymes. When you pasteurize anything, and especially raw milk, you're destroying the bacteria, the enzymes. You're denaturing all the proteins, denaturing the whole product. It turns something that is super healthy into something that is toxic and cancerous. So I would never consume pasteurized milk, but I would definitely consume raw milk, and there's a reason why it's illegal. And it's still illegal in most states. Some states it's not, but it's not the point. It's a food that has been consumed for thousands of years. It comes from nature. Why is this food being banned by anybody? Why is it even being allowed by anybody? It's a food. I mean, it's people's choice what to put in their own body. Ultimately, do they not own their own body, right? They're not harming other people.
So that word denature, so it's taking away what is natural, right?
Exactly.
It's what you do. And I've heard of denatured alcohol, but what is this? What is this meaning?
Well,
this is a new word to me. Sorry.
Yeah, well, and denaturing in chemistry is perhaps different from denaturing on cooking versus denaturing philosophically. But there is a philosophical, meaning I use the word denaturing for. So, anything that is taken away from nature and messed around with, touched by man, and man is like messing around with all of nature's stuff. We take a plant, we hybridize it, we put it in a laboratory, we do all this crazy stuff. And people will say, oh, well, it still comes from nature. Yeah, but man took this and didn't think about what they were doing and turned it into this other product just because it felt better or it tasted better or because we need to feed more people or because of greed. But if we have an actual comprehension of what we're doing, now we're working with our nature and the nature of our world. And now we create what I call a naturalizing relationship. So naturalizing or naturalization is the opposite of denaturalization or denaturing. And this is something I describe in my own philosophy I created called natureosophy. I created this because there is a fallacy that's accepted among most, I'd say 99% of the world's philosophers or people who study philosophy. And that is called the appeal to nature fallacy. They believe that just because something is natural does not mean it is healthy. I say that is bonkers, that natural and healthy or natural and good are actually one and the same. And that this is precisely the reason perhaps why humankind is willing to trample upon nature and denature things and make the appeal to denature, that is to say, giving themselves an excuse to mess with nature because nature is imperfect or nature is not good. And so we need to perfect it with our own creation. And so I'm saying no, all the answers are around us. Nature is good. We just need to learn how to work with it, right? And we can have man-made creations and AI. AI was created out of NI, natural intelligence. But when you understand that, that means that natural intelligence is above and beyond artificial intelligence. And that also means that it permits or allows artificial intelligence, which means if you don't have natural intelligence, artificial intelligence tries to replace, tries to mimic, this natural intelligence, and it can take over our humanity. We don't understand who we are anymore. But if we have our natural intelligence above artificial intelligence, we can use it wisely, and we can understand when it's actually, crossing the boundaries per se. How we have boundaries in social relationships. We have boundaries like what I'm going to do, what I'm not going to do, what I have principles, what moral rules do I live by. If we don't have some level of that, we don't have a level of discernment or discipline within our lives or temperance to know how to create order in this world.
So
we lose a sense of self.
So can I ask you a question then?
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's an answer to this, but do you think that the scientific method is actually a form of artificial intelligence? Because in a scientific method, they're isolating something and wanting to prove it based on that. So extrapolating from that is just like, white willow bark was the precursor to aspirin.
Yes.
But in white willow bark, you have all of the natural ingredients that those other chemicals that are working together. But once it's now taken into a scientific model, it's isolated. Mm-hmm. So then, isn't that what AI is doing, is isolating a certain aspect? And so, it's no longer you've got an isolated chemical here but it has side effects. And in a natural environment, the side effect, everything works in synergy, so there isn't that side effect. But when you look at the scientific method, what are you doing? You're isolating. Mm-hmm. And artificial intelligence is isolating a thought process instead of taking everything into consideration.
Instead of being holistic. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Right. It's like, oh, well, AI can take in all this information. It can be very holistic. The scientists will always argue against nature in trying to be calculative and trying to get everything under a grasp. And that has a fundamental issue, and why I talk about Taoism, because this is where Taoism comes in, I would say, very key, the ancient Chinese philosophy. It's all about understanding the natural way, the Tao, of the world. And this is a philosophy that's also, you can say, based in science. But it goes beyond it because it helps you see past your own mind. And, you can look up, I think, a good interview that kind of it describes this dynamic too. Richard Dawkins, who's like a known atheist, right, talks to a Buddhist monk. And it's funny, when you look up these atheists and you talking to Buddhists and Taoists, it's like they don't disagree. But the atheist has an agenda. The Buddhist, the Taoist don't. And what's happening is the scientist is isolating compounds out of nature, like you said, and they're taking, and this is similar in politics, we're taking certain aspects of our world and we're projecting it on the rest of the world. We're saying this is how reality should work. This is the statistics. This is the facts. We are the experts. And that's where it becomes a problem. But I can call perhaps what you may call true science, which is like open-minded, always willing to explore. I'm willing to study everything. Nothing is ever really truly figured out, but we're trying to get a grasp on things constantly. That would be very different from scientism, as people describe, which is like a left brain, rigid, like this is the way things are and it can't be any way else. Right? So artificial intelligence is a tool. I mean, it's art, right? Art is man-made. It's an expression. Like we can write all day portraits of the sun and of the moon and the stars and the trees, and we can draw such beautiful paintings. But it's not nature itself. And nature to us is drawing paintings every single day that we can't paint, that are unique. It's basically generating. Think of AI, how it generates images for us. NI, natural intelligence, is generating images for us every single day, all around us. Our lives, every moment is different, is special, right? And when we see that, we tap into this natural intelligence. It's all around. It's just always being generated for us. But artificial intelligence, it's like, oh, wow, it's this amazing thing. It's like natural intelligence has been doing this all this time, you know? And so really, and often you see this too, technology is acting as a compensation. What we're missing for in our lives. Oh, I don't have a girlfriend. I don't have love in my life. So I'm going to start dating online. I'm going to start typing to people online. This gives people an excuse and appeal to the nature to not go out and socialize. But which one's more natural? Them talking on the phone or on the computer versus talking to somebody in real life and connecting with their fellow man. So this is the whole contention, and this is a big field of study, of course. The whole reason why I created Natureosophy, because it's not an easy thing perhaps to grasp, especially as you move into an age of ever increasing AI. You're not going to know what's reality and what's not. So being reminded of what is natural, what is nature, this is where permaculture comes in again. Being in touch with nature and feeling the ground and feeling grounded. Some of the stuff, consciousness, love, technology can give us a sense of it, but it will not give us the whole of it. It will never give us the whole of it. We can take everything out of nature, isolate everything, make compounds, make AI engines and machine learning, and we still won't have the whole of nature. We still won't have everything figured out. And even then, we're using AI, we're getting all these big databases, and then we're asking it a simple question or like a couple words. We're isolating ourselves. We're limiting ourselves. So it's quite an interesting dynamic. And yes, it has to be explored and dissected in 100 different ways if you wanted to. But frankly, I don't think nature likes calculators that much. Tesla said this too. It's like one day man will kind of work his machinery to the frameworks of nature itself. And everything's vibration, frequency, energy. And so coming to understand this, you have quantum physics, all this stuff coming to the mix. I think technology is a beautiful thing. It's coming of freedom. It's coming of nature. It's just that if we lose touch with what was there before, what was always here, what is always present, we're going to lose our ability to control technology. The tool will become the tools of our tools. It will start taking over us and our being, and we won't understand what is true love anymore. What is true connection? What's social connection? And that's where we are now when people are having depression and anxiety. They don't know what, a real social environment is. So they have all these mimicking systems in place, and it's actually causing more of the problem. It's not actually fixing it because they're not getting the real deal. Their body is like they want real nutrients. They're putting fake nutrients in the food. They're not getting the real deal, right? So it's the same thing across the board, whether you're looking at politics, health, artificial intelligence. It's all a disconnection from nature, an isolation of certain thoughts, of certain compounds, and us projecting onto the rest of the world, and thus isolating more people in their minds and their ideas. And so it just causes more division rather than a unity, which is naturally present within nature, because we're all part of the same earth. We're all connected to the same source. It's us who create these borders, these countries, these laws, these restrictions, right? All these moral codes. The moral codes can do the same thing, restricting our ability to simply be present, to discern and see all the gray areas and see where we have to act as necessary. I mean, it's like, how much have we philosophized and made science of this world that cannot be philosophized and made scientific? We're trying to grasp the ungraspable. And that's why, in the Tao Te Ching, it talks about water being essentially the representation of the Tao, because you're trying to grasp something that's just going to fall right out of your hands almost every single time. And most of our world is water. Bodies are world. Water is an amazing thing. So there's a lot of symbolic nature to this too.
So when you've how many books have you written?
So I think around 7, because usually I have like small books that are like not nearly as big as like the slavery one, right? This is like this I consider as a book. The other ones are more so like guidebooks, or there might be small like practical books. And some of my stuff, it might be ebooks, it might be documentaries. Like I try to produce every single format.
So,
but
do you have a target? Do you have like a target? Like you've been talking about the young people. Are you basically writing to evoke their interest in things? Is that, do you have sort of a target way, or is it,
No.
it's open to everyone, but are you hoping to reach, to be that voice for the younger generation? Or, is it
Well,
through animation? And I know, I'm going to use an example of, if spirit science. They do it through animation, but they're bringing forward a lot of, he's brought forward a lot of information, but it's opening up to a younger generation.
are you talking about Spirit Verse, or something like that? I might be in touch with him.
Spirit science is what he used to go by.
Yeah, we might be talking about the same person. Yeah, I think I got in touch with him.
Jordan. His name is Jordan. Anybody have?
Yeah, it might be. But there's several channels that produce a lot of great work, and they appeal to different audiences. And I love animators, and I have ideas for animations, but I don't know how to animate stuff myself.
Yeah.
So a lot of things can kind of unfold on its own. I might meet somebody along the way who has that expertise, and then we can do more. But no, my content does not appeal to any particular crowd. It really just appeals to the truth, or what I see needs to be expressed. I don't have a particular bias or ego or desire going into it, because that would thwart from the nature of the material, right? That would put in my ego into the work, or essentially a projection of what I want to see. So I don't want that into the work. But at the same time, yes, I'm trying to get involved with colleges and universities to reach my generation. So that's what I'm doing for that. And my content will change naturally over time as I connect with them, and as I meet more, and as I understand their interest. Why should I, claim to understand their interest when I'm not in touch with them, or I don't know who I'm addressing the interest to, right? So I need to connect. I need to resonate first before I can deliver a message to them. And that's important to me, because that will happen on its own. Like, a lot of this happened on its own. Me running into the abolitionist, slavery, nature, all this stuff. It all happened so naturally because I just followed the calling. And so I'm receiving a calling, yes, to reach with my generation, because who else is going to do it? I have a moral obligation. If I didn't do it, I would look back on my life and say, oh, shoot, I missed an opportunity. So I'm absolutely going to do it. And my content's going to naturally shift as a result. I won't even need to try. I know it will. But at the moment, the works I have now, no, they're not appealing to a particular group. They will appeal to anyone whose time has come for that event, for that information. And that means, especially as I said before, the future. As AI increases, people's interest in this work is going to grow exponentially. As we become more enslaved, people's interest in my slavery book is going to grow exponentially. But when we become free, guess what? Our message about freedom, it becomes irrelevant. Frankly, we can become historic figures, but you actually want to become irrelevant to create a change in the world, because you want the ideas to be so mainstream that you're not the only one doing it. So just think about that for a moment. Is I'm not doing this for me, because why would I? If I stand for the truth, I can't. The truth is beyond me.
So,
Alex Landry just tuned in and said he was interviewing you pretty soon for Truth Lab podcast. Oh, okay.
Yeah, Alex was cool.
I missed a bit because I don't know what's going on over here. But anyway,
it's all good.
What did I miss, guys? Oh, okay. Now it wants to let me in. It wants to let me in on the computer now.
By the way, I plan on doing live streams in the future. I've followed streamers for a long time. I totally resonate with my generation and their feelings and their desires. And my content, I know, is not fun and exciting for them. I know some of it's too long for them, and I know, but again, it's a generalization. Some of them are, some of them aren't. I have to connect with each individual. I have to produce different types of formats. There's a lot of dependencies, right? But me talking to them directly, getting them involved, getting them in a support network, that's going to be the key. Sorry. You muted me, I saw. Okay, are we good?
Oh, I'm sorry. That's me touching the computer screen of my phone.
It's
I'm
all
trying
good.
to catch up with you guys.
But yeah,
I'm still being kicked around. So
it's a natural shift though, reaching my generation. If I go in with more expectations and desires, I'm going to be very disappointed because I'm going to be attacked. I'm going to be, I'm going to run into resistance. I'm going to face all sorts of different things, but I'm not going to look at it like that. I'm really going to go in with love and open arms and learn from them because I think their value is underestimated. And when I say that to them, is that people are like doubting them and their ability to change the world. I think they're going to start seeing things in themselves. Like if I just told them all the people that go to my events are like 50 and older, and they all think that the younger generation doesn't care about anything going on in the world and won't make a difference. What do you think they will think about that? You know what I mean? That's what I'm curious about.
What people don't really realize is the rejection of the material is really based on this disenchantment that you get from the hypocrisy around you. When you become burnt out with a system, because there's an overall system that people are burnt out with, and that's what causes the rejection and not care. Because I can care about if it becomes so overwhelming, you see so much moving around in our detriment, it becomes this thing that I can't even deal with it, right? I don't even want to touch the topic because I'm so overwhelmed and burdened mentally by the fact of everything that's going wrong, everything that's broken. And it's really difficult sometimes to think about your individual process, your individual purpose when you see someone need to be.
You're breaking up a little bit.
So sorry. So I have to be more patient with you
Artificial intelligence on display right now.
Oh, wow. But be more patient
There you
with
go, guys.
because it's like calling people.
Yeah, it's not getting better. Sorry, it's hard to hear you. Terry, I think we have to take over. Oh, you're muted too, Terry. Goodness gracious. I don't hear you. Oh no. Goodness gracious. Well, how are you guys doing in the chat? Let's see here. I'm gonna tell them I don't hear him. All right. How do you get kids interested in the fact that NASA is admitted to having anti-gravity technology via registration and certification of such craft? Well, here's the thing, right? People are interested in all sorts of things. You have to pique people's interests, right? It's so hard to generalize. I mean, think about the world is confusing. There's so many influences. People have different interests of all kind. And this generation is smart, and they some of them are not going to like the empowerment, but many of them will. I guarantee it, because you just approach it from the point of view that they enjoy. And again, they love nature, they love animals. They're going to want to know information if they have kids, what to do, as a parent. They're going to want to know AI and the dangers with it because they're moving into that, and they may even have experience with it. I'm sure a lot of them have experienced burnout or experienced like scrolling through TikTok endlessly. I can appeal to the things that they've done because I've also experienced it too. And again, I've helped kids in school with depression, anxiety, all this stuff, and all they need was a support network. So just being there is enough, right? I don't need to go in with a crazy agenda. And that too is a big plus. I will say to them, I don't have an agenda. I'm myself. Don't you want somebody who can just be real to you rather than a world where everybody's trying to get something from you? Pay for this, do this, vote for me. That right there, just the simple basic foundations is what I'm going to unite people around. And I think it will be amazing what will come of it. And the proof is in the pudding. Hold me to it, but it will happen, right? Because I can talk about it all I want, but I have to do it. And then when you see it, that will display itself, right? So let's put it that way. I still don't hear you, Terry.
Okay, so
There we go.
I'll try here. So, how about if I was just going to say, Alex, I don't know how I can't put you on through StreamYard, so because I don't have the controls. So, I apologize for that. Erica's. Anyway,
well, yeah,
so
we're at the hour mark, anyways. And Alex, we'll do a show together, dude. The Truth Lab. Don't worry, I've been texting you.
So I just wanted to apologize to Alex because Erica's having some problems and I don't have any of the controls here. But what I was just going to ask you with regard to this, Cory, is like some of the ancient teachings. What you're doing is revitalizing a lot of those ancient teachings. You know, perhaps you could even say they're Lemurian teachings. You know, where you're going back to that connection with my ancestors, the plants, the animals, just that whole philosophy that we've lost over time because we've now moved into more of that I and me instead of a community effect. And so perhaps you're bringing back some of that ancient wisdom. Does that resonate? Or is that something you've looked into or felt compelled to work with?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think everybody sees it, they feel it. And undeniably, a lot of the things that the parents say to the kids agree with. They just, kind of go against it because it's not the culture at the time. It's just not the way things are. There's people sometimes detect the truth in what other people are saying, but will still deny it anyways for a number of reasons. But just something to throw out there because sometimes just the way people approach it, right? Their parents might be right about something, but because of the way the parents share that, it makes the kid want to rebel.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like the parent might be very authoritative with what they want their child to do. And it makes the child not do it because of the approach, not so much because of what it is. They would actually do it on their own if they were encouraged or supported into doing it. So again, another reason for me to be open with my approach as much as possible. And things will manifest on its own as people will find out, oh, I wrote books. I'm not going to share with them I wrote all these books, frankly, because I don't have to. It's like it'll come up on its own, Oh, I watched this video I did. I don't have to do that. It's like, why? I'm going to make real connections with real people and show the truth in action, which is just doing that and saying I don't have an agenda. So if anybody else wants to do that in their area, go right ahead. But reflect on it and think about what I'm saying, so you understand what I'm trying, what I intend to do. But the best thing to do is me demonstrating it, right? So as much as I can speak on it, it's obviously there's a high demand for it. I've talked about it with you guys. I talked about it in my previous interview, the previous one before that. It's like appearing again and again. So now if I don't do it, you guys are holding me accountable. It's pretty funny.
Right.
You guys are like, Cory, you got to go to the colleges. I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, fine. It's like, geez, I'm not even a social person too much. I'm a bit of a hermit, like to not travel too much. But I do want to make those connections. I think it would be fun, and we'll make it fun.
So I just got a note from Erica. Her phone and her computer, everything is out for her. So she's hoping to get back online, and so she's apologizing for that. But she wanted to just, I think she had started talking about the food forests, and so I can't exactly tap into what she's saying. So I'm going to ask her from my point of view. How do you see that developing? Is it something that can, like how does it, how do we, I'm saying we, but how is it brought out to people? Is it through education? Is it through visual? What is a way that you think is going to make it something that becomes almost a mainstream kind of way? And do you see it happening?
Yeah.
Like how do we see it happening? How can that work? Is it going to be at an individual level? Do you get little community groups going? Do you get kids interested in planting
All of it.
tomatoes, or
All of the above.
what do you think is going to work?
Yeah, I'll answer D, all of the above. But yeah, seriously, everything. It's all going to make it happen, but I can guarantee you it will happen. Jim Gale and I are working on projects. I'm trying to get land. He's got his land as a demonstration spot. A lot of connections are happening from there. Once you reach the influencers, once you reach the jails, the churches, the schools, it's over. When it becomes a mainstream phenomenon where people can just plug and play, where they know what to do, where they have the material in their hands to inspire them, where there's content creators talking about it, it's over. It really is that simple. And like I said, it could take overnight, it could be in a week. And it does not, absolutely not, though, require us going off grid and having to build some self-sustainable communities. But that will be the result of it. And there'll be many other things as the result of it. There'll be good, there'll be bad, but they'll be mostly good, considering the fact that people know that this is what they need. And they can't live without food, and most people can't disagree with that. So it's outside of politics, it's outside of race, culture, nationalities. It's very unifying. And so the only thing that can happen is, people are individually attacked, or something happens with their health, which is not likely to happen because everybody's healthy in the permaculture movement, and everybody's usually off grid or in their own land. So that's not likely to happen either. So it's pretty darn looking good for the future for permaculture. And voluntaryism, the same thing too. Those ideas are growing exponentially every single year. There's 3 or 4 times more voluntarists than the previous year, and that term is becoming more widely known as an alternative to politics, as an alternative to anarchism, because anarchism is a word that scares a lot of people, and voluntarism is the idea that we can live voluntarily and without the need of rulers, that we rule ourselves, but that everything is simply voluntary. You can still have hierarchies, you can still have companies and organizations and businesses of all different kinds. It's just that they should all operate voluntarily. Very simple message, because the government operates as an involuntary hierarchy. Certain people are believed to have more rights than others, have the authority, the right to rule over others, and have the right to do violence to others who are peaceful and just living their lives. So voluntarism says, be gone with all of this barbaric nonsense that we've been doing for thousands of years. And this is the same exact notion that I'm talking about with political slavery in the Abolitionist. Now, notice what I just talked about. Is this going to interest my generation? Absolutely not. But in the light of all the divisions in the world and all the arguments that they get into with politics and religion, they're going to find a lot of value in this naturally, as they realize that I don't have an agenda because I'm a voluntarist, because all I want is for people to live voluntarily, which means they can think whatever they want as long as they don't impose it on others. And so when they find out that's all my message is, there's nothing for them to disagree with me on. And we can just talk about anything in the world and have no problem, because nobody is saying, well, you have to agree with me. That's the very problem with debates, is it not? The very problem with war is somebody thinks they're the victor and the other one person thinks that they're the victor and that I'm right, no, you're wrong, let's go to war, let's fight each other until the death. I mean, my goodness. There's a reason why Mark Passio doesn't do debates. I don't do debates. They're not productive. We want to share the information, have people come up to their own conclusions, because thinking for yourself and speaking for yourself and acting for yourself is the solution. So let's put it into action by literally not having a position. Quite ironic, that is, right? The position of not having a position.
And it becomes a movement, but not but an involuntary, voluntary movement or whatever, right?
Right.
It just becomes the ideology. It becomes the ideology. It becomes part of the mass awareness. And so it becomes organic in that sense, as it seeds itself.
Yeah.
Right. It becomes, because there's no restriction on it, then it's free to root in the places, like we want to talk about rooting and planting. It roots in the places and it's feeding where it's fertile, but then it creates that whole mycelium.
Yeah.
Right? It creates a network, so you have the plants that are planted, but then it's what goes on underground that becomes the real movement of it, right?
Yeah, and you can't censor voluntarism because it isn't a position. So it's
Yeah.
not like someone saying, "Oh, here's this conspiracy in the world. This is what's going on." No, it's like somebody just saying, "Think what you want, just don't impose it on others." How is that? That you can censor the individual content creator, you can censor a channel, but you cannot censor that message. It's same thing with growing food. It's like you can't get rid of all the plants in nature. You can't destroy all the forest. You can throw chemtrails over it all you want, but the plants will filter it out. And now we have technology to totally reverse all that. Pat Miletich is reversing bacteria, reversing all the problems. People think it's impossible. Well, he's proving it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's what's happening.
Oh gosh. So Erica, I just got a note from Erica is that she can't even communicate. She's locked out of the show. So I don't know.
That's funny.
I'm kind of
we can rejoin. She can start up the link. I'm still live streaming. If she wants to go live again, I mean, I guess that's the issue though, because then she has to go live again.
Okay,
but
I'll just ask her. Do you want to do?
But I'm still on, so mine won't get interrupted.
Okay.
All right. Let's see here.
Let's see. I'll just send her this.
By the way, thank you, GovCorpWatch and Alex. And I know that both of you guys want to collaborate. We can do that for sure. Not too consecutively, give us some time. But but that's definitely we can collaborate. It's just that we have to also think, right? Is everybody going to watch an hour-long live stream, or is everybody going to watch a 5-minute video? There's a reason why we do videos too.
Yeah. She said that won't. Her phone is jammed too, so it's her phone and her Wi-Fi are jammed.
Unlucky.
So wow, this is like, oh my gosh, poor Erica.
Yeah.
This is okay. She's just texting something here, so we'll see what she's.
Thank you guys for tuning in. The Ronin Experience. That's interesting. I haven't seen you around on my channel. Wisdom of love over love of wisdom. That's nice. Mm-hmm. No river is ever the same. The homie is crushing right now. Who is he talking about? Yeah, AI doesn't have natural intent. Yeah. ChatGPT is not really AI. You sound like my friend Mike. You know Mike. He connected us. That's what he says all the time. You get the point. When I say art or artificial intelligence, I'm usually grouping it in with everything man-made, because usually the same rules apply to literally everything man-made. Even though we call AI this great grand thing, anything man-made is just taken out of nature and isolated for our use. Even if we can combine those things then together, they're still not what they were in nature, right? Yeah. All right. Well, we can end it if you want. We're at an hour and a half almost.
We're an hour and a half. Yeah, and I'm not sure we can end this. I'm just asking Erica how she wants to do this, and I'm sure that she would. I know she's apologizing. Okay, so she says this. As he says, my generation. I have the question. The pool is diluted because people feel their own cause is more important than others.
Well, exactly. So I may feel tempted, right? Everybody's gonna feel tempted to say that their cause is more important than others. That's how life is. You run into information, you run into experiences. You're like, wow, this is important. Everybody needs to know this. Great. So we share that and we dialogue it and we open it up. And essentially, that's the free market, we would call it, right? The free market of ideas. You share this idea, you share that idea. If I like that idea, I follow that idea voluntarily. The problem is where somebody says, this is the idea. If you don't like this idea, you have no choice but to follow this idea. Right. So that's what I'm against. And that is, again, an idea of not an idea. It's really just a basic morality that most people follow, but they only give an exception to it in politics, because politics gives free reign to say you can alter morality. You can give people more rights than others. You can, coerce the farmer who's just living his own life and telling him how to, what products to serve. It's absurd. To anybody, if they were in that farmer's shoes, they would understand. But because they're doing it to someone else, they don't. And also because it's done hidden. It's done under the guise of authority. It's done under the guise of this is right, when in reality it's arbitrary. It's somebody thinking it's right, but other people disagree. And not everybody's going to ever agree on morality or anything, frankly, in this world, which is why everything has to be voluntary. So that way people can live the life they want to live without interference from other people. So basically, self-ownership is recognized and held high. So that way, slavery is gone for good. Yeah. Slavery is coercing someone, controlling them, and telling them how to live their own life. Any degree of that is bad. Let's get rid of it completely. So chattel slavery, 100% of somebody's labor taken from them, abolished. But let's get rid of taxation, where we're taking 10% of somebody's labor, or 5%, or whatever, even 1%. Oh, but we need that 1%. It doesn't matter what justification you make. You're still taking something that doesn't belong to you. Let's talk about that. What makes it right for you to take something that belongs? Oh, well, because of this justification, because of this greater good. They throw out some abstraction, some collectivist ideology that they have to justify stealing from someone. But they wouldn't steal from them themselves. And the act of theft itself is wrong. So what makes it right all of a sudden when you attach all these ideologies to it? You see what I mean? It's a straight contradiction.
Well, even the Bible says not to tax a man on his sweat, right?
I've heard people use the Bible for 100 different ways, right?
Yeah.
There were people in the times of abolition who were pro-slavery and anti-slavery, both using the Bible.
Yeah.
Staunchly. Ministers, people who claim to know every aspect of it. And the churches were mainly pro-slavery. But when they became anti-slavery, and again, those abolitionists started their own churches, that added great momentum to their cause because they had a spiritual investment into their cause, which makes it infinitely more greater. But again, that greater force can be good or bad. I mean, government has been founded on religion, essentially, in history, where people believe they had the divine right to rule over other people. Like, oh, God gave me this right to rule over you, and you are naturally inferior because God says so. So that was used for thousands of years. That only got challenged like literally a couple hundred, not even 100 years ago. Like, civil rights movement happened after the Civil War. So like, we're making leaps and bounds of progress with technology, with the printing press, with equality and natural rights. These ideas, they may have existed forever because they're natural, but they've been suppressed and they've not been taught. And people have been kept docile and ignorant of their potential, which is why they're not free.
You're making a good point about the different causes. I mean, I heard there was a man, he had a rescue for, say it was pit bulls. Mm-hmm. There's all kinds of dogs that need rescue, right? And his was just focused on pit bulls. And so in one aspect, everybody thinks that their cause is the most important cause. And that's kind of what makes it so difficult to cooperate because I can't tell if Terry's going out or me. I'm so paranoid now. I'm like, I promise I'll be good. Internet, I promise. But
I know the internet gods.
So difficult to be in cooperation with one another because everybody has their own particular value that they think is important. Mm-hmm. And now it seems like everything is diluted. Like something to me that is arbitrary, like straws, paper straws, because I'm like, how are we going to save the planet with straws?
Yeah.
Where maybe even this generation, because I'm not making, oh my gosh, I'm not making any more babies. So for other people, they're like, abortion is more important. You know what I mean? And so how do you get people to work together
Right.
on
Well,
one
think about this.
thing? Because I might be
Yeah.
belaboring. I don't know
And
what I missed.
I'm against, abortion personally, right? But just because I'm personally against it, and I think nobody should do it personally, because I think it's just morally wrong. I'm still not going to tell other people through the use of law and government to how to live their own lives. So, do you see
This
how
becomes the slippery slope that came about when it came to wearing masks. And so we're going to limit
right?
certain words. But I thought if you can make me wear a mask, then maybe now you can make me write Democrat on it.
If your
Or
idea is so good, why do you need violence to impose that idea? Are you not able to convince others, educate them, show by example? See what I mean? When you start adding violence, it basically says to the teacher, "You don't need to teach."
I also heard
That's what
that
violence
you
does.
can tell how stupid, not necessarily stupid, but how thoughtless a culture is by the rules that they have to make. You can tell the morality of a group of people by the rules that they have to make. So if I have to make rules like do not kill, do not steal, do not rape, it doesn't mean that we're the best, most upstanding society. It means that we have some problems, because otherwise we wouldn't have to make rules about it. But now here we are extending the rules to every personal part of choice.
So, yeah, as the result of a few bad people, we impose and create a system of slavery for everybody. So,
Right.
it's like, oh, well, because somebody might hurt you, we need to create a whole system that hurts you guaranteed every single day so we can prevent the possibility of this one wrongdoing. That's taxation, by the way. It's like, so you don't want thieves to come into your house, but you allow the government to steal from you every single year, every single month. And everybody is not just okay with it. They actually say it's necessary and moral. So they totally flip it on its head. They take an immoral action and turn it moral. So now you want to know why it's so dangerous? Why statism, which is this belief in authority, why government is the most dangerous, superstition, why political slavery is the root to all slavery? Well, now you know. Because people are taking an immoral action and turning it into a moral action, even though they understand what is morality. They can't see their own contradictions because they never sat down and asked themselves why and how. And I prove it through the history. I go through every single concept in the book, and I share the abolitionists and I share the former slaves. And you read what Frederick Douglass says, and he's proud to work for his money because he's able to do so voluntarily after being a slave. After he freed himself, he's like, I'm proud to work for somebody else because I want to, in order to get money, and I'm helping them. And if I don't want this job, I can choose not to. And some people even extend that and say, well, that's slavery because now they're working for a wage. You know what I mean? But the problem is always much more complex because it's our economy as a whole, is failing because we have this system of slavery. And that's what people like the Mises Institute and Lew Rockwell and Austrian economics is proving, is that when you get rid of the government and you have the free market control the world, you have the real government in control. If somebody wants something, supply and demand. There'll be it if there's a demand for it. Like, who will pick the cotton after the slaves are abolished? Oh no, who's going to do it? Well, there'll be people. And guess what? They'll work harder because they want to work, as opposed to slaves who are forced to work and having, you need violence to make sure they do work. Now they're like, oh, I got to work. And now you actually have a less productive system. But if you actually free them, you actually have a more productive system. Oh, shoot. Wow, freedom works better for order? What's going on here? Freedom is not chaos?
So there's a sovereignty movement that you're a part of, and I think it can be done more than one way.
To preface real quick,
Oh,
if you're talking about the assemblies, I'm not really part of them that much.
Okay. Got it. Because some people feel like they could be, there was what's her name, Terry? It's Anne.
Ayn Rand
Her name is
or
Anne, and
and
she is the little woman with the glasses, Terry. She almost looked like you, but
Uh,
Anne Vites or it's
Anna von Reitz. Yeah.
there you go, Anne von Reitz. And so I guess that's something I looked at in 2017. But then I personally got to the point where I felt I'm inside the matrix and I can work from within the matrix to do what it is that I need to do. Like I didn't feel like I needed to break free and do paperwork
Right.
and do that. I felt like from within we are inside the matrix and we destroy it from within. Neo
Exactly.
didn't go hide on the ships or in the tunnels. Actually, they kept coming. They came back into their existence in the matrix and used the matrix to against itself. And that became something because when I became awakened in 2017, I was learning so much. I was listening to Mr. Maxwell and David Icke and oh my God, Alex Jones. And for someone like me who didn't have any background in it, it overwhelmed me as an adult. I
Yes.
you could have fried an egg on my head, and I had no way to to filter the digestion of this information
I
because
don't
now
blame
I
you.
was newly retired and I was just like taking in gobs of it all day long.
Yep.
My mate was concerned and he was like, "Get off the computer! You're on the computer and it's changing you." And I became like this, person
Yeah.
that
Isn't it crazy? I'm like a health coach now for recovering conspiracy theorist. Like I'm a health
right.
coach for health coaching people through their conspiracy syndrome. It's like there's got to be a
Right.
word for this, right? There's got
When
to
there
be
was
some
no
sort of word for
sleep
it.
involved, it was like I don't know what it was. It's something like it's almost, but see, because then there's all this false information mixed in there too, and the hype that's mixed in there too that doesn't, and then there's not as many solutions hooked in there too on
Yeah.
prayer and meditation and stuff like that. So I didn't find the spirituality section until 2021. So I had to be talked off a ledge. And what helped me was my friend told me, he said, all time exists at once. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. Whew. Like somehow that worked. And I was able to understand that I don't have to worry
Yes.
and I don't have to freak out that what is supposed to happen is going to happen. All time exists at once. And I don't
Presence.
know. Somehow that just calmed me down.
Absolutely.
And
Presence is key.
yeah. So I don't know what you want to say about that when it comes to people who are new, because I think like here we are where we're years ahead and some of us are like, wake up. Like you said, we don't have to pound this into anyone. Because me personally, too, I look at the little girls at Chick-fil-A and they're laughing and joking and they're looking at hairstyles. And I don't feel the need to drop the bomb of everything that's going on in the world and actually destroy people's peace of mind. That at some point, people, because especially if our job is to anchor in the joy, right? Our job is to anchor in the joy, not to smack the crap out of people with the facts, but
Yes.
but to anchor in joy. And so, in where's you can talk about all of this, the balance of learning what it is that you know, but still remaining in a place of peace, a place of personal power, and a place of joy at the same time, and not feeling that you got to punch people in the face and drag them into this new level of thinking that we got going on. It's really not for everybody. And maybe there's a time and a place for them that they will naturally find this on their own.
Yeah. Yeah, a comment just said this: individual sovereignty. My ulterior motive is to see others grow into more of who they are. Automatic exchange. I learned too, and
Automatic
it
exchange. Wow.
spontaneity is a good word I like to use for the order that occurs in nature when you learn how to let go, in a sense, or learn how to work with what is. Right? Because when you
Ooh.
work with what is and you are mastering what is, then you are present. You are part of the flow, right? The flow of life, what the Chinese call Wu Wei, which is in Taoism stands for spontaneous, effortless effort. And you can look this up as well. And there's many videos talking about this concept of wu wei, the art of not trying. People will call it the non-doing. And it doesn't mean to do nothing at all. It's intelligent non-action. It's working with the laws of social, natural, of the natural world, and understanding how to kind of just learn to let things unfold. Because when you get a high head on your shoulders and you think this is how things are, then you tend to complicate things further, right? And you get in your own head a lot and you create problems that don't need to exist. And in the conspiracy world, there is a tendency to fixate upon ideas. Fear is often also utilized, even though there is a great demand against fear. It's more so like a fear against fear and the ego of non-ego. And this is prominent, especially among even gurus too, who create a cult movement as well. Is they say I'm right because you're wrong, and because of the deceptions in the world, it creates an opposite extreme. So they go from one extreme to another extreme, unable to create the bridge. And they alienate themselves from the rest of people, and they create a polarization, as Carl Jung would call it, from the rest of the people that they want to help, and therefore they're unable to help them. So again, what is the approach? Simpler than what people think. Asking questions, being present, and letting things flow, not having an agenda. And then, even though you know everything that you know, it will come about naturally by connecting with people, understanding where they are at. A practitioner would not talk to their patient or client going with a bias or an agenda. If they need to understand their patient or client in order to heal them, they need to work from where they are at. They cannot just go in and say, do this. I mean, we see how that works in Western medicine. It just causes more problems, and then they keep giving them more pills. So think of the world like you do in natural medicine, if that's how you best approach it, right? It seems like you guys kind of have a holistic mind. So that's why I'm sharing it with you guys. Somebody else might approach this differently. But it looks like to me that you guys are looking things from a bigger point of view, and I love that. So, you know, I've met a lot of people who've, recovering from InfoWars, recovering from independent media in a way where they see the truth that they're sharing, but they don't know how to grapple with it or how to share it with others. And so it's like, I feel like I should probably make a whole work dedicated to this. Um, but basically, it's something that everybody faces, and the media will use the extremes that the conspiracy theorists turn into. Right? They use that word as an attack and say, "Oh, look how crazy they are. This justifies us controlling them. This justifies us, doing what we are doing." They use that to their benefit, and it's the same reason why Gandhi or Martin Luther King Jr. would use nonviolent resistance for their cause. They didn't show any arms because they knew that if they did, the media would quickly spin things on them and people would call them violent. Even though they're not violent people, because they're showing some signs of resistance, the media is like, oh, look at that. They're trying to fight back against us. They're trying to create a revolution. The abolitionists were similarly pacifists, many of them. So they were arguing that we should not use violence ever. And so most of society was like, what is going on here? But it made it much harder for the media to attack them because they were calling the abolitionists crazy and chaotic for wanting to free the slaves. But they weren't, because they were literally the most peaceful people on earth. Religious Christians who were pacifists, and anarchists was obviously they were attacked for being anarchists, a lot of the abolitionists, because they were building their own towns and against the government. So they were attacked for that. But they didn't play their game. They didn't accept it. They said, we're not anarchists. We're not what you call us. We're just ourselves. We're just living our lives, and that's the key. Is I don't want to have a title or an identity or a desire to try to change things. Really, I'm just going to be myself and do what I need to do. I need to share the truth all the time. That's a moral obligation. That should be a natural obligation. I'm not trying to do it for any particular purpose. I'm just like, the purpose is within me, right? The purpose is throughout. So it's a much freeing experience mentally, not just physically, to learn detachment, or in Buddhism they talk about that idea of desire and attachment being the root to all evil, right? It's for a reason. Freedom has a lot to do with dependence and attachment. Like, I'm holding on to something, but when you get rid of it, you feel like, oh my gosh, I have a weight off my shoulders. So it's the
It's
same.
a huge thing, Cory, because a lot of people will impose their thoughts and they will say they're worried about your best interests. But
Yes.
it's a very tricky thing, because
Yes.
it's basically your attachment to a particular outcome, or your loss of a person, place, or thing, right? You know what I mean? So now you begin to lunge into trying to fix and save or change or protect, when it's, like if I'm a mom, I'm
Right.
worried about my son leaving home. And
Yes.
why? Because I'm afraid of the loss.
Yeah.
So not always is it the person's best interest, but it's what has triggered a fear in me to
Hmm.
become concerned, to say I'm worried, or
Yeah. Well,
I'm
fear.
trying to
Yeah,
fix
fear is
you,
a
I'm
good
trying to
thing.
save you.
Anger and fear, these are things we shouldn't fear within itself, right?
Right.
Isn't that funny? Again,
It
it's not.
seems like a natural thing. It seems like a
Yes,
thing that you're supposed to do, but it's this
it's
other
being played
thing,
on.
another thing that's on the other side of it.
All of
You
it exists for a reason.
you
It's beautiful.
grappled on something, though, that I feel was important. Is you said that if you're a part of a movement, you don't need to be the most important person in the movement, because that means you're the only one. That means there's not enough of it, right? And I don't know if I'm not saying it necessarily correctly, but there's this thing that says, I want to be important, and I want to be known, and I want to be first, and then the creation of the cults, and then the separation that comes from it, because it becomes us against them. And that was what I was hitting on about the youth when I got knocked out. Is when we look at youth, they're so disappointed, so they're overwhelmed by
Yes.
all the problems. So I'd rather look at none of the problems. Kind of
Yeah.
like if we come to people and we start talking to them and trying to rip away the safety and comfort of Christianity or Islam and things like that. If we try to rip that away, it leaves this huge gap of unknowns and possibilities. And
Yeah.
people are attached to these ideas because they want the stability and peace.
Yes.
They need this blanket and comfort. And so as people are coming
Security.
along trying to tear it down, they're like, wait, like, I'm not ready, like,
Yes.
I'm not ready for all that yet.
Right.
And so we're constantly trying to chip away. And then so I'm just throwing a bunch of stuff at you. So
That's
anyway, this is like
amazing
word
observations.
soup. But this whole thing, where is this idea that what I think is important, what I think people should know is the most important, or how I think people should live is the most important, or everyone should hurry up and ascend because I have the solution for 9 billion people on the planet. Because after millions of years that we've evolved into this place, I feel like what I think is important is the way that ascension should go. And this is when we really don't even have a glimpse of what is really happening around us. Like, we can't look back 9 million years and say, oh, this is what the plan is based on this small existence. And so here people are standing on the laurels of this is what is important. And we need to hurry up. And it's like we think we really have all these answers. And
Yeah.
it's like, what if, someone asked me, what should we do to help people ascend? I said, what if we don't do anything? So it's funny that you said that, because I'm like, what if it's not your job? Because I
It's
feel like
funny.
everybody wants to be Neo when you're really just an oracle. You know what I mean? Like, you're just a person that someone, when a red flag goes on, they say, oh, have you heard about this? Do you know this? Do you understand this? And you say, oh yeah, I was reading about that. And now we can have this conversation when the person comes to you, not when you go, get over here.
Yeah. Right.
I think everybody was guilty in 2020. So
Yeah, yeah, we all have our moments where we perhaps fall to impulse, right? Or
right.
or fear falls to an unnatural extreme. But the fear is there naturally within us. There's going to be natural anger, natural morality, whatever you want to call it, natural. Basically, what I mean is an understood, a knowledge based application of what we're doing in this life. So we're not just acting whimsically or arbitrarily, or, just like, oh, I'm going to do whatever I want because it feels good, but I'm not thinking about others and how their life is, and how that's going to affect me in the future, right? We're thinking short term or distraction based. So everything is going through transitions in people's lives constantly, and there's always things to address. Nobody's perfect, and that's more so even than the reason why to say we've had it figured out is kind of foolish. But it's not
I'm
to
gonna
say
interrupt
that.
you and say this though. Can we see fear as a warning sign for ourselves? As soon as we become in this moment of fear, now we have to be like, wait a minute, why am I tripping?
Yeah, exactly. Well, that requires presence, right? It's like to sit down with yourself and say, like, what do you feel right now? Like if somebody's trapped in fear, they're like, that's their mode of operation, right? So it's gonna lead into their actions and what they do. So if they're present for a moment, they can notice it and then shift it or change it, or recognize it's there and be like, whoa, what is this like feeling inside me? Why am I so like tense? Why is my posture not like changing? Why am my face, is getting angry? Why is my voice changing? Like all that happens as the result of presence, right? So presence is the key, essentially, to connect to God, source, spirit, whatever you want to call it, which is why all the religions can agree on some basic things like the golden rule and presence, meditation, prayer. It's all forms of connecting with ourselves and the world around us to reflect in a deeper way, right? Closing your eyes and breathing and developing practices to have that take you away from the distractive, physical world. And then you can play with the physical world. When you feel free mentally, spiritually, the physical world is not an enemy. It's like a playground. It's not. It's like people you meet. You laugh at the enemies. The so-called enemies, the people who make fun of you for the fact that, like, I feel bad for them. It's like I don't get angry at them back. I feel bad for them, or I kind of like I laugh. I'm joyful. I'm like it's kind of funny because it's like why are they like that? And they let their impulses get the best of them. And it's like, man, but it's all about being aware ourselves. First and foremost, I did a video about judgment, and I said judgments are holding humanity back, because everybody's judging constantly. And it's not that I'm against judging, right? People are going to judge all the time. I said that in the video. I said judging is going to happen on its own. Fear is going to happen on its own. All these things are going to happen on its own spontaneously. The question is how we handle it. The question is what we do with that comes to us. And so that's the key. I'm not saying to get rid of fear. Like, you're not going to get rid of it. You're not going to get rid of love. You're not going to get rid of all these ideas. You're not. Even government as an idea is not going to get rid of. It's simply going to shift in form. The form is going to go from involuntary to voluntary, because that's what nature has been seeking for thousands of years, at least based on my analysis. And people can make up their own minds, but every time it rises and falls and collapses on humanity time and time again, it's pretty much like nature giving us a sign, like, this isn't working. Do something else. And that's why people are constantly scrambling, like, oh, maybe this system is better. And the state nationals think their system is better. And I asked them, I say, how do you know your system is the best? Right? And a lot of them are on the same page as us, actually, I would argue. And they're realizing this is all barbaric. This is old ways of doing things. Why are we following the past? Like these people we didn't even know, like Jefferson, Washington, constitutions. This stuff is old. Like, we're done with that. We're moving to the age of technology. Our minds have evolved. We're past so much of the way we used to think. So people are seeing the problems with the assemblies because it's based on the past. It's not based on the present. And it's still based on saying they have a structure for how the world should work.
Right. And if I have to sign another piece of paper and enter into a new agreement, why do I want to sign any agreement? You know what I mean? And it's almost like saying, what the future should be like. It's exactly what you just said.
It also, like, you're begging.
Your system is the right system.
You're begging for permission to be free, also, by putting in paperwork. Yeah, and you believe in the paperwork as like some sort of holy document that can like alter reality. There's so many problems when you face it with nature, right?
It's another ego trap.
Yeah.
It's just another ego trap.
And now it doesn't mean there's no value in it, and there isn't a reason why people aren't following it. It's just to say that for somebody to claim it's the end all truth and that everyone must follow it, that's where it becomes dangerous, right?
Well,
Like
here it
anything
is, Cory, because I remember in 2017 when I was losing my mind, I thought, oh my God, let me get a diplomat visa. And remember, people were going to Costa Rica and all this
Goodness
stuff was
gracious.
happening. And then I thought about it and I said, you know what? Where the hell am I going to go to escape the matrix? There is
Yeah.
There's no escape.
there is
Right.
no, I can't go to Machu Picchu and be free. I have to do it myself.
Yeah.
And there is no paperwork for that. And I'm gonna go back to the thing where you said fear. And fear is this undercurrent. It is necessary to have some, because there's healthy levels of fear. But all, like you said, become present, look inside and see, well, where is this coming from? What's triggering this? And have some type of understanding. Like, I had irrational fear. When I was driving, a paper bag could pop up. See? And so that's an extreme level of fear if I stop my car for a paper bag.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm not functioning properly because I'm allowing fear to rule over me in an irrational manner for something so small as a paper bag is
Right.
not going to destroy me. And so can you look at your own fears and say, wait a minute, this is about as damaging to me as the paper bag.
Yeah.
I don't need to freak out about this particular situation. But I'm going to lead you back to this because you said the word enemy. With your enemy, is there truly an enemy?
Right. Exactly. Well, that's why after I said that, I caught myself. I'm like, oh, no, quotes, because, I detect my own language. I'm like, if I use the wrong word, I have to make clarifications because people, will take words in different ways. And I try to be very particular with my words, but I'm not perfect. So,
No. I mean,
but,
we say
it's intent, right? It's intent that matters. And that's another thing about the paperwork is like, oh, the words and how you word things. Well, what about our intentions? So I'm being told in my chat constantly to start using the word understanding instead of understanding.
You know what? You're so on the same page.
Yeah, and then I meet people.
Good morning. No, it's what's the other word they use? Grand rising. And I'm like, you know what?
Yeah.
I have decided that I understand what I mean.
You know how many translations change in the past 50 years? How much words have changed?
I understand what I mean, and I don't have to make up a new language or go back. And I don't have to do that because people even say the word God, right?
Yeah.
When you say he, and it's like, look, I can't go through all the terms. You know how many terms you could use to describe God? And so I really don't have time to translate all the words for you.
You know what's
so
funny?
You understand what I mean.
Those people are the same people. So they say that nobody's get triggered, right? Everybody's getting triggered. The left is always triggered by words and by, everyone's getting triggered. But then meanwhile, you use the wrong word and they get triggered. So it's funny because
that's external, right? That's basing what you got going on inside you externally on what I do. Mm-hmm. And you're allowing, you're so affected by me that you have to try to control me in some way and change the way that I speak when I think, and I try to tell people this too, because I try not to flip out. Like, I think you know exactly what I mean by what I said. And I don't think we need to go through, what do you
I'm
call
the same
this?
way.
I don't think we have to thumb wrestle or fight with pencils and pencil fight over legalese because the curses have been lifted. Me personally, I'm not living with these curses. I reject them. Just like people say they want to reject the money system. You go ahead and do that. I believe I'm going to be prosperous because I believe that it's my God-given right. It is my natural born right to be sovereign, provided for, and abundant in all ways. So if you would like to be poor and wait for the money system and Nasara before you hit your lick, you do that. But let me be prosperous now, travel the world, do my grid work, and go meet up with Cory, say high five, let me do my thing. And you sit inside your house and stock up on food and you wait for the end of the world.
Yeah. And go on Twitter and start, ranting and tell everybody the world's ending.
And rant. Because that's really bringing the joy into the world.
Yeah. And see, I'm inspired too because I do events and I see people and I connect with them, and that that gets the momentum going. And when you make connections with real people and you have these conversations, you see much more. When you're not and you're stuck on the internet, you're more likely to think, oh, the world is doom and gloom
Right.
or whatever. Because again, it's polarization and individuation. Carl Jung had a bunch of words to
And people
describe
don't
this.
really realize the sabotage that's going on, that even though you're a truther or a trumper or
Yep.
whatever it is that you are, that there are people who send you false information as well. And that's what pulled me out of the 2017, around 2017, 2018. I was like, you know what? Let me back up, because I went to school for film and digital media, and I know how to do green screen and voiceover, and I know how to make these videos where you can make a person's body move and things like that. So
Cool.
let me check myself, because in reality, I really don't know if what am I watching, who made it, why did they put this ominous music on the screen, and why are they sending this content to me? So now I have to back up and be like, what is it that I'm digesting, and where did it come from?
Yeah.
That people don't really understand that people are paid to make these videos and Photoshop pictures of Obama with the Black Panthers. I was laughing at this today because Obama's not even old enough to be a Black Panther. Okay. Like, so now you're, like, okay, guys, pull back on some of this stuff that you're digesting. Go outside,
I know, right? Touch grass.
get off the internet, kiss your grandbaby, talk to your sister, hang out in the shoe store. It's okay, and you, like you said, touch some grass.
Well, it's like an expression on the internet, when somebody is like going crazy, it's like, but yeah, and see, people see it. And see, that's what's funny, right? Is I guarantee you some people in the colleges, universities, and people who are younger see that in some of the conspiracy theorists, and that's why they just don't engage, because they're
Because
like,
we come on real strong
yeah,
and hyper, and then we actually make ourselves appear illogical because we skip from subject to subject, because
yep,
this touches that, and it's like, have you ever seen that book, Men Are Waffles and Women Are Spaghetti?
no,
The
that's wow.
conspiracy theorists are all spaghetti. So waffles have these little sections, and this stays in a compartment, so you stay on that one subject. But the spaghetti, if you put that on top of a waffle, it touches all the boxes.
Oh my gosh,
And
that's
so
funny.
now, as a person who's into conspiracy, you'll pop. You move from Trump, and then you're going to go to
Yeah,
Hitler, and then you're going to pop back around to,
I know, right? It's so true.
to
It's so
aliens,
true.
and people are like, back the freak up. You know what I mean? Because you're
Yeah.
talking about like a whole bunch
And,
of stuff at once.
and you know what's amazing is, like, I think we're at the point, maybe I don't know if you agree with me, but it's like where you can just sit back and look at all these different crowds of people, and you're like, you can say anything to me, ask any question, like I'm open, I'm down, like, because I connect with those people, and I'm like, I love them, and I love them just as much as the person who knows nothing about it. Because that's who I am, right? I'm
Right.
able to see beyond all of it.
I realized during the shots that we had to stop doing that, because people were like normies, and then they're talking about the people with no shots as if they were
Yep.
diseased. And it's like, guess what, guys? If you know that this is the Matrix, understand that the programming was done and they did a really good job. And have
Yep.
some compassion for people. But then also, too, don't discount people because we think we're all ahead of the game. Those people, as they begin to wake up into the information, I was like, they might pass you by.
Yeah.
They might be well beyond what you think that you've learned. They might really show you something. So don't discount people, and
Yeah.
sometimes there's going to be aggravating conversations, but just try to back up out of the being aggravated and meet people where they're at. Like you said, that's very much important.
I'm glad that you your internet fixed and everything. You made really good points. I love it.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I put sage underneath the computer. Come on. Maybe I
I
should have
mean,
put
hey,
it on the
maybe
Wi-Fi.
it worked.
Not
Maybe it
even
worked.
my phone wasn't even working. The regular service wasn't even working. I was like, okay.
That's crazy.
Okay. I put a piece of purple string on the computer. I was doing some energy around here, girl.
Some magic.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, with the things I hear sometimes from people, it's always possible.
Yeah.
And I ask a lot of questions. Like, coming from a health background, I'm always like, I have that scientific part of me that's like likes to dive deep into things, right? But I'm very open minded too, so I think it's beautiful. I really do. And just imagine when I have land and I'm able to record this video in a food forest.
Right.
But we have money raised, and so we're almost there. And
See,
Alex, who is on here, is actually I think going to help me with doing some of this, and he's in person, so I know him.
See,
And
this was the thing
yeah,
where people were all against the money and the money system. When I first became awakened to what was really going on, my first thought was, if we're going to build the new world, we need money to do it.
hmm
And so I was pushed into finance.
Mm-hmm.
This career of finance, because I was like, I need to know about money, because I need to know where it goes, where it comes from, and how to make it, and all these things. And so I became, where some people are like, no, the money system. I'm like, well, how do we rebuild the world and take it back over if the rich evil people have money and the poor good people don't have any?
yep. Yeah, it's like, and it's the same contention, right, that happened actually after the abolitionists in the 1900s. It was a growing problem where once the slaves were freed, the masters, like, they were compensated by the government to free their slaves, so it made it less of a moral cause and more of an economic problem. And then they introduced taxation shortly after the Civil War, and
So
so
then
a lot of
everybody became slaves.
yeah,
Yay!
exactly. And then the slave went from like, oh my gosh, I'm free, to now having to work under a wage, and then they're not paying them that much, so that way they're still kind of slaves.
Yeah,
And
you're an
so,
indentured servant still. If you work at
so
McDonald's, you're
yeah,
an indentured servant. Yeah.
yeah, and so then they created, then there was the whole communist revolution and socialism, because that was created out of the concern for workers and for the people who were, working really hard and working in slave-like conditions, which is why they created the term wage slavery, right? So all of that was the result of these problems that are much bigger. And so people were then saying, okay, well, let's just create our own communes free from money, where we all build each other's stuff and we all own each other's stuff. And that way, there's shared collective ownership. And obviously, those ideas kind of resulted in many millions of deaths because people thought those ideas were great, but then chose
It
to use
sounds
violence.
dangerous. That sounds
They
dangerous.
chose to use violence to make those solutions happen.
Mm-hmm.
But there were voluntary communists, there were voluntary socialists, and they were radically different from the communists and socialists who were promoting the government and using a certain law framework, like Karl Marx, for instance. He was of course, the founder of communism or Marxism, and he had friends nearby like Proudhon and Bakunin that we don't learn about in history. But these friends disagreed with him. And a lot of people disagreed with him in his friend circles, even though they agreed with him that the workers were being oppressed. And Bakunin basically predicted the rise of communism and the problems that resulted from it. And he was more of an anarchist, saying, like, let's not use the government to promote our ideas. Let's promote, a voluntary system. And so Karl Marx and them, even though they agreed on the basics of like, yeah, we want to help the workers, they both had two means of getting it. Karl Marx said, well, if we just give everybody what they need using the state, eventually everybody will just be free because nobody will suffer from poverty or disease or anything like that, because everybody will be equal. It's like make everybody equal, then they'll be free, and let's use the violence of the state to do it. Bakunin's like, that's crazy, that's just going to make the state bigger. And Proudhon was like also known as like the father of anarchism. He said, no, that's crazy. And they each had different views on different things, and that only reinforces the voluntarist idea. Voluntarism was an idea that was more so like coined by Auburn Herbert, which is an abolitionist coming from like the UK. And he just like deduced it because he recognized all these anarchists were fighting each other. Some of them were like anarchists just calling themselves that to try to use the state's power and trying to just be a rebel and trying to just, go against the system for the workers and to go against the evil capitalists who own all the land, who own all the stuff, the means of production, right? That's what they say. And so they were jumbling these terms together. If you were a socialist, you were also a communist, you were also an anarchist, and you were also a Marxist, and you were also a collectivist, and you were also, what I mean? Like all these words just start jumbling up together and turning
It's
into this
scary
word
when
game.
people learn words, isn't it? Boy.
Yeah, and the assembly thing happens too, where people are fixated on words and ideology, and that it doesn't end well usually because they're not seeing the bigger picture. So, the point I'm making is that it's interesting how history unfolded, right? Where basically Bakunin was proven right, and he was actually kicked out of the International by Karl Marx. So there was a contention there, like where Karl Marx and communism got big at the expense. Anarchism basically died, but it had some sense of hope in the 1800s because of the abolitionists. And the abolitionists were like the first anarchists, truly, in history. It wasn't them. It wasn't the communists in Russia who were trying to free the workers. It was the abolitionists who were trying to free the slaves. And they said, we need a better system. So it's interesting how all those ideas happened around the same time, like 1800s, 1900s, and then you had Hitler and Stalin all prove what the result of those ideologies were when you use violence. It's insane. It's crazy.
I'd love to ask you this: have you studied the cults, compounds, biodomes? Like you said, we don't have to live off the grid, but it seems like this thing, like every 10 years, like there's a new good one, like, and they all mean well. What is the antithesis? What is the reason? The reason they start and they sound so good, but then always tend to fail. Because I always say this too. Whenever we go to a conference, people say we should all stay together, and I'm like, no, we shouldn't, because we're not gonna like each other that much if we see each other every day.
Yeah, well, okay. Learn from experience, right? Josiah Warren was an abolitionist who's created several towns during the time of abolition, and he made experiments, and he found out it doesn't work. Trying to create some sort of intentional community where everybody has to share stuff. So he became, later on, more of an individualist, as philosophy and historians would call it, which is the idea of, having individual property and individual rights, which, again, that was being challenged after the Civil War because people were like, we need to create communes and we need to, unify. So, Josiah Warren was creating all these towns, and he's like, yeah, we need to give people their own property. We can't be utopian with this. Like, there is a utopian aspect that is bad, and there's a utopian aspect which is good. The utopian aspect that's good is like, we can do better. And the utopian aspect that's bad is like, we need to do things in a set structure with this way and make sure everyone's perfect and there's no money and there's no this and that, and this needs to be that. That's where it gets difficult, right? And so there's plenty of people who believe that now, where it's like in the truth movement, where they think, let's create a certain framework and blueprint, and this is going to make our lives so much better. But every time it's been tried, it keeps failing. Why? Because it's too intentional. It's imposing upon the individual, and the individual wants to live their own life. They need their own property. They need their own space. And we live right now, as we do, most people in the world, this is what freedom looks like. The evil in the world is an illusion. The politics, the problems of the world, it's all illusory. When the governments go away, not much is going to change, except the fact that you won't have World War II happen again. You won't have mass democide. You won't have people, being taxed and hidden violence being done to people, and farmers having all their stuff sieged by the government. Like, you're not going to have mass events happen. You're going to have evils happen. You're going to have people do bad things, but just like normal everyday life. But you're just not going to see it on a mass scale because nobody will be enforcing the orders in order to do it. Nobody's going to be given the moral right to do wrong. Nobody's going to be given the authority over other human beings to have more rights than anybody else. So it's very simple when you understand it's life as we live right now. This is reality all around us. We simply have a small contradiction that prevents that. So a good example, look up Life Done Free. He's a channel. He's one of the biggest land developers in the United States, and he's totally into the freedom movement. He says to people, yeah, intentional communities and stuff don't work. And he knows because he's part of a community that he created that does work. And it's not having houses next door to each other, having it in set places. He knows that the best way to do it is maybe have everything you need within 5 miles, having, people that you can rely on nearby to get together for projects. And you can do everything that people want to happen, but you don't have to do it in some like, oh, we have to buy this land and make this like dome, and then we have to use all this fancy. No, like that's just going to complicate things and make things really difficult. I've been told about this with my project many times. Cory, could we live there? Could we create a neighborhood? I'm like, this is not for me, and I'm not even going to live there. It's not for you. It's for the world. We want to educate people. We want to create change. And then from there, neighborhoods will start as a result, right? Like people will start making neighborhoods, as a result of these ideas sharing. And some of them will do good and some of them won't. Just like now, there's developers who are making houses and they're making neighborhoods, and some of them do good and some of them don't. It's the same principle, but nobody is obliged to uphold certain things. I mean, there's a reason why people don't like HOAs, because it's kind of like that, right? And there's a reason why, people don't like condos or being under a landlord, because it's kind of like that. They have some obligations. So people clearly can feel it. People know when something's wrong. And it's all just nature giving us signs and warnings to say, let's not have like a utopian vision of the future, but let's be practical and real and give people their individual property. And we can live like we do now, but free, abundant, and joyous, having what we need and getting all the social interaction we have without having to separate ourselves from the rest of the world and go off grid. Right?
I see it, and I was looking at it, and I was like, I always just see it's a dangerous thing, because I don't want to be going to town. I don't know the town meetings, and we gotta all meditate together at the same time, and like all these things where it's like, I like being able to go inside my house. Right. When I want to, and be just me and my family.
And that's why I talk to people.
Things like the words, Cory, because then it becomes the words too, because I didn't say it the way that you like it. And because I used words that you don't like, and now it's
so can I just sort of interject here, because I grew up in a long time ago, but I grew up in the 60s. I grew up in the 60s, but we had small communities. And then there was that movement to move to the cities. And so within the small communities, we all had our own gardens. We lived an organic life. You want to talk about having an organic farm. We did, and maybe my mother might have had to put, dust on the potatoes so there weren't potato bugs, but generally there was no insecticides or anything. And, we grew our own chickens. We didn't have cows, but the neighbors had cows, and, we bring our quart and get a quart of cream and make, but that was a community offering other things to the community. So, we went and got cream from this farmer, that farmer came and got turkeys from us. It was that whole community. And so moving away from it, and I can talk with my counterparts, and it's like, what all we're wanting to do is go back to just that way of life that we had before being taken over by this idea that, the city is the place to be, and all of this, that manual work is something to be ashamed of, and subsistence farming was a bad thing. And meanwhile, people are looking to get back to it, but it's a skill that was inbred in us.
See what you're talking about? A commune versus a community is different, because people are trying to take that to another level, because they want to enforce like a religious standard and this level of social obligation.
Yep.
That is the problem, because what you're talking about is the independent community where we just know how to act, and we know how to treat each other, and we know how to bond and connect, not this social structure of a commune, which becomes its own political organization. And then even with that, once you start gathering people together inside this commune, it becomes us against the world, and then you end up with Waco again, and these other things that are happening because we are here, and it becomes this thing of manifest destiny. We're here to change the world, and now you begin to project outside against your other parts of society, and say, oh, well, we know better than them. We're gonna go take this down. It just somehow people get real busy
This is the point of bartering, right? It's like you
Yeah.
get together people, you have a market, you have a place to go where you hang out, and it doesn't have to be your front lawn, it doesn't have to be everybody's lawn together. It can be a place where people just go to hang out. Like, and that's what I'm trying to create actually. It's just a community center. So not a place where people live, but a place where people gather, like a church or like anything else where people gather for, different services or whatever. It's just an education spot to demonstrate the solution. Yeah, a hub like Marcos is saying here. And he's somebody who is helping set up bartering networks all across the state of Florida right now. So he knows about it a lot. So does Cameron James, who works with Jim Gale and Food Forest Abundance. So, they have experience with this stuff because, again, they have the 50 acres in St. Cloud, Florida. Marcos is constantly traveling. Cameron's constantly traveling. And Cameron's putting a food forest in people's backyards, replacing their lawns with food forests. And now they can barter, they can trade with their neighbors. They're an inspiration to their neighbors. Now their neighbors are wanting to get involved, and now they're part of the community naturally. No force, no having to fixate these systems. These systems happen by themselves by simply showing by example. Saying here's the solution, right? And then Marcos is setting up permablitzes as well. So he'll go to people's houses and say, okay, let's all plant a tree together. Let's all go to this location. Let's go plant this tree. Okay, oh, you live here? Okay, let's all go here and let's help this person put in a tree. And we all do it to enjoy each other's time and our energy, and we help everybody out. But nobody is like, oh, you have to live here. You have to do that. You have to contribute this much. It's like, no, it's all voluntarily done, right? And
we've seen it with church. And so we're basically, I was watching a show and the guy said, once you've been so long in a cult, you can't help but create new cults. Like you leave one cult to create a new cult. And so here we are, we're part of the church system. And so we just go build new churches. And this is what I'm seeing in spiritual communities is it becomes a new church.
Yes.
I am good, you are bad. I am right, you are wrong. Do it this way or else you're not going to ascend.
Yeah, and I can't do that on the land I get. I can't be like, oh, can't have that. I mean, listen, it is still property, right? So it is like I as a property owner, I can probably decide what happens on that property. But if I do something that people don't like, because I'm going to be recording everything, like I'm going to be filming constantly. Somebody will tell me in my comment section, be like, Cory, you're doing this wrong. You put the plant in the wrong spot. This person is like sharing all this material. I'm gonna be like, okay, well, there's a reason why you're concerned, but let's kind of investigate. Are they open-minded? Are they nice? Are they driving people away? What's going on, right? So there's going to be things to work out, of course. When you deal with people, when you deal with any organization, when you deal with your own property, there's always going to be some level of conflict, even between neighbors in any neighborhood. Doesn't matter what it is. So just something to bear in mind that, when it comes to nitpicking, that can happen. But really, if you set your mind and your intention to it, anything is possible, generally speaking. But when people have good intentions going in, yeah, they're coming out. It can be very different.
I keep going back to this, but it just reminds me of like the 99 edicts. Who could get violent about how much you love God and you're not loving God the right way? You know what I mean? Like, so we're going to so now we're like America. I don't know how many thousand of churches we have. And they all say they're the first church of such as they're first Baptist and first Presbyterian and first, and they're the original and the ones and they're the right ones. And I always found it difficult to understand it. Like, hey, for I'm going to heaven and everyone else is going to hell because you go to this church, so you're all going to hell.
Yeah, so like on the land, personally, I would accept if somebody came to me with religious material. I would be like, I'm open to all of it. I would have all of it. I wouldn't just have Christianity. I would have Taoism, Buddhism, and all the rest of it. I would share it all and, let people talk about it amongst themselves. So it's because this is a freedom like education center, right? So for me, it's going to be having a bunch of materials of all different kinds. A lot of it you may not agree with, but that's because it's the nature of freedom. Like, again, showing by example, we want to be a site to say, well, let's have an array of different speakers and different events. And that's what I've been doing every single month in Tarpon Springs. Every single month is different events. Springs. Yeah, every month we do something different. And every event is like mind-blowing, for people, because it's like we don't know what to expect, and there's different stuff, and everybody's like excited, and it's inspiring. And because we're so open, we keep meeting more people who have new information to share, and so it's pretty awesome. And I don't have like I call the group Freedom Florida United, FU. So on purpose, and people get a joke out of that, and I just do things out of play, not out of crazy seriousness. Like has to be this way. It's like, no, just enjoy the process, have fun, and then things. If you take things so seriously, that's can be a problem too, right? Just have things kind of lightly and be present, and then things will kind of flow in and out where they have to be. If somebody's not supposed to be a part of the project, if somebody has bad intentions, they'll kind of get weeded out by everybody else, and everybody will start noticing their actions and their beliefs and what they're doing, and they will start to feel like they don't belong. Like things are just amazing, like the universe and how it works, right? That things kind of will happen when you trust what happens sometimes. Not that you trust evil, obviously.
People will filter their way in, and then they will filter their way out.
Yeah, pretty much. And they'll find themselves if they have to, right? And then maybe come back to you and say, "Oh, I was sorry," or "I didn't mean to do that." And I've had that happen many times in my life.
So Cory, it's 2 hours, 24 minutes.
Yeah, I should probably go hang out with family.
I mean, I think I could go back and forth with you all night. I mean, honestly, because I mean, we're just, we didn't even get into the Taoism and the real, the stuff. Like, how did you get into all that? So I look forward to talking to you again. Melania, are you on here? Drop me a comment. Let us know you're in there, because I need to know who those people are. Leave us some comments, you guys, and share. It's been an amazing discussion, and man, I don't know if you've ever done a past life reading, but I'm like, how many times have you been here? Because you don't seem like a firstborn at all.
No.
Me, you're saying? I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about a lot of that, because I reached out to a channel, Typical Skeptic.
Robert. Yeah,
and I told him, like, I really like his content. I was told about him from somewhere. I have no clue how, but I just find connections somehow. And so I don't know how deep I'll go with him, but I told him I've had a lot of synchronicities in my life of all sorts of different things. But like I told you, when it comes to these topics, the slower I go, the better. When it comes to the
it's good. I was gonna say you have plenty of time.
Well, yeah, because I tend to speak fast, and I'm used to being camera oriented. But when it comes to the spiritual topics and the stuff that gets very personal on that end, I have no choice but to slow down.
That's awesome.
Yeah, quite a bit.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because that's full intentions of you connecting only what is good for you, only what is right for you, and the right place at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a beautiful way to be, where it's no pressure for you to imitate what anybody else is doing.
Yeah.
I'm like that too. I'm like, pump your brakes. If I'm not ready for certain information, I'm like, no. Sometimes I do it politely, and sometimes sometimes I regress into the recesses of my own mind, and I'm like, so I yeah.
I'm gonna go hang out with family. I also got to do a lot of stuff. So
yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it though so much.
We got all the links put up, and this has been amazing. So we're gonna.
I love hearing your insights. Yeah, and I love how open-minded you are and sharing everything. Very awesome. Very awesome. Thank you.
We have fun over here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you.
All right. We're going to fly, y'all. Bye.
Bye.